Who is the single most powerful and the greatest Jedi in all of Star Wars lore? Well, I think the answer is actually pretty obvious. Luke Skywalker, to me, is the ultimate Jedi. When we look at the interpretation of Luke in Star Wars Legends, there is little denying that he has become everything that a Jedi was meant to be. You may have clicked on this video because you expected us to exclusively talk about Grand Master Luke, and how he beats all the competition due to his raw strength and command over the Force. But that kind of power was never the core to Luke's character, nor is it what made him the greatest Jedi that has ever lived. The EU novel says this about the Grand Master. Seen through the Force, he was a maelstrom of luminous energy, a force storm against which there was no shelter, and yet all of his energy poured from a calm center, an eye. The power that Luke Skywalker possesses is in fact a byproduct of the strength of character that he possesses, all the lessons that he has learned on the pathway to destiny that has led him to the Grandmaster role. So what makes Luke Skywalker the greatest Jedi ever? The holocrons beckon us, my friends, so open your curious minds as we pay respect to Luke Skywalker, the ultimate interpretation of what a Jedi truly is. From the very inception of the Jedi Order all the way back to the Thoyor arriving to the world of Tython, the Jedi were meant to stand for peace, justice, and the unity of the galaxy, both in the Force and its civilians. But when light is at its brightest, it also casts the darkest shadow. And it wasn't long before the shadow of the Jedi made themselves known from the dark side of the Force, the arrival of the Sith. The Sith tipped everything out of balance. The Jedi would lose their purpose again and again through war with their great enemy, and it is difficult to be champion of light when you have to make decisions in the dark, making decisions in the face of unwavering evil. Because of the fear and pain cast upon them by the Sith, the light of the Jedi faded until their hearts became cold and rigid. Their dogmatic ways and harsh restrictions of their members were meant to keep peace within their own kind. Above all else, the Jedi feared seeing evil rise in the ranks of their brothers and sisters. But the fence laws only served to quell the potential of greatness among the Jedi, and to provoke those that did not naturally fit in. They did achieve the peace that they desired for a time, but by then, the warring with the Sith had changed them, and the Jedi worshipped their own success, their political supremacy, instead of listening only to the Force. Ultimately, the arrogance and dogma of the Jedi Order would be their undoing, and the balance of the Force would tip out of their favor. The Force would correct itself, and Sidious would rise to power. But not all was lost. The chosen one of ancient prophecy had emerged from the whispers of myth. A boy promised to bring balance to the Force, to eradicate that which made the Jedi fall from grace. The Jedi suspected that this prophecy meant the Sith though, and not themselves. Fate stabbed the Jedi Order in the heart, twisted the knife as the very dogmatic ways of the Jedi set them up, protecting their members from falling to the dark side. Those same laws drove Anakin into its arms, and from the ashes of the Jedi Purge, only a handful of Jedi lived. Only a pitiful 1%. 1% of 10,000 Jedi Knights of the Republic were left, and that number dwindled with each passing day. Those that remained did not have the heart to even call themselves Jedi. They were lost, and in reality, only two real Jedi Masters remained: Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, those that decided to hide until the time was correct. This is where Luke Skywalker's journey begins, the new hope for the galaxy, for the Force, and for the Jedi. He was born of Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala. His inheritance was all the potential of his father and the humility of his mother. Luke was not brought up with a traditional Jedi education like those before. Instead, he was given the very thing that was taken from Anakin: a home, a family, and a complete, carefree childhood away from the troubles of the galaxy. This taught Luke love and loyalty, and yet he had a longing for adventure and excitement, along with a desire to know who his father was. Only then did the Force bring him back to Obi-Wan. The Force needed Luke to experience love so that he could carry that with him, because that was something that Obi-Wan could not teach him in Jedi training. The Jedi of old were taught to have a general compassion, to care for all those indiscriminately, but they weren't allowed to have any attachment. Luke himself was armed with love though. This was his greatest ally, and his most powerful weapon. This would be the single thing that made him stand out from all of the other Jedi from centuries past. The thing that set Luke Skywalker apart. A love that defined his character. The family that he knew was taken by the Empire, burned by stormtroopers, and as far as Luke knew, Darth Vader had betrayed and murdered his father. But he did not seek revenge. Luke only sought to honor their memories by becoming a Jedi. And from the Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke would learn discipline. This begins the trend which sets Luke apart from all other Jedi, which was how he took aspects from all the people that he met and experiences that he had. His father Anakin knew how to learn from the fighting styles of those he fought, such as Obi-Wan and Dooku, but Anakin's flaw when he only paid attention to how people fought instead of how they lived. Luke Skywalker learned how to be diligent in the training from Obi-Wan, and then he would learn wisdom from Yoda. The Grandmaster taught him that being presumptuous and what it meant to be a Jedi was wrong. A Jedi did not crave adventure or excitement. They cannot look away to the stars in the future. They must have a serious mind, pay attention to where they are, what they are doing. And Yoda also taught Luke how to open his mind, how to believe in the impossible. This is the Force. Nothing was truly too big to ever overcome. And in the dark side cave of Dagobah, Luke ignored the advice to leave his weapon behind. That was when the Force decided to speak to Luke directly. It warns him that if he is not careful, then he will become just as Darth Vader is. But Luke was very much unlike the Jedi of old. He did not fear the dark side. All Luke knew was that his friends were in trouble and that they needed him. His loyalty to his friends was only rivaled by Anakin, and Vader knew how to use this against him, to torture his friends, to lead the boy to a trap. Luke purposefully ignored all the signs that it was a setup because his friends needed him. Anakin would have too. Luke's love shined through once again, beating back the fear of darkness as he charged headfirst into battle, a battle that he knew that he would not win. And yet, when the bombshell dropped and Luke learned that his father was Vader, he could have collapsed completely under this burden. He would have been bitter against Obi-Wan, sought revenge for his severed hand. But instead, Luke went back to Obi-Wan's hut on Tatooine, humbly searching for answers to become an even greater Jedi than before. Rather than give up on hope after losing his father's lightsaber, Luke forged one for himself using a synthetic crystal. He crafted his own weapon, his own lightsaber out of scrap of Tatooine. And at this point, Luke had only been studying the Force for 3 years. He had only really gotten a collective month and a half of training from Yoda and Obi-Wan. But this wasn't because he was just that good. It was because Luke worked hard and did his best even though he had failed dramatically time and time again. Later, Vader would admire and even compliment the craftsmanship of Luke's Jedi weapon. Vader was pleased with how far his son had come with so little. And a few years later, when Luke was a powerful Jedi Knight, he was ready to face Vader again, but not in combat. Luke had an innate connection with the Dark Lord, and he knew this. He still believed that Anakin was alive. In Vader's life, Luke does not represent the past the way that Obi-Wan or even Ahsoka does. Luke represents a second chance at a future. The only person left that truly believes in the good within Vader is Luke. And on the Death Star, he did everything he could not to fight Vader, even though by now he was able to reasonably hold his own. Witnessing him firsthand, Palpatine secretly desires the power of Luke, but he also fears and respects it. Luke is in the crossroads of destiny, a place where many Jedi have failed. The Emperor is right before him, goading the boy to strike him down. But Luke's mind is on saving his father. This stokes a conflict within the machine body of the Sith Lord, and Luke once again employs the weapon of love against darkness. Years earlier, Dooku had used the dark side called Dunmak, utilizing insults, belittling words to inject doubt within Anakin's mind. A powerful technique meant to unbalance Jedi, cut them off from the Force, make them question who they are. But Luke openly admitted to using a light side version of this. Luke chose words of love, encouragement, compassion, trying to reach inside the pained mind of Vader, weakening his position in the dark side. Even when Vader forces Luke to taste the dark side, causing the boy to beat him down mercilessly, the son of Skywalker realized that he and his father were no different. He failed at the cave when he brought his weapon with him. But here, on the Death Star, a new darkness had risen. The Emperor's throne room. And it would be here where Luke would finally learn the greatest lesson of a Jedi. He did not need a lightsaber. He did not need his weapon, and he would toss it away. This was the defining moment of Luke. This is the moment where Luke Skywalker becomes a Jedi Knight. He created a beacon of light so strong that it brought Anakin from the depths of despair. He would not let Palpatine kill his only chance of family. And so, although Luke was not the chosen one, he allowed the chosen one to fulfill his destiny. But this is not the end of Luke's story. He would go on to use the lessons of compassion in all of his subsequent encounters. This hope for the heart of others turned Mara Jade, a former darkside assassin sent to kill him, into his wife and the mother of his child. Luke would rebuild the Jedi on a foundation of love, encouraging his Jedi to marry and to have children, families of their own. He believed in the same ideals that Revan had long ago. Revan knew that the emotions of love bolstered the power of the light side to a level that the Sith could not comprehend. Luke's Jedi were the strongest, even debatably more powerful than the Jedi of the Old Republic. They could have families, they could love, families that they would fight to protect. Their children would bring a new generation of even more powerful Jedi. But beyond even this, Luke learned from the mistakes of the past. He allowed his Jedi to have lives of their own. Many who trained under his Jedi Praxium went on to protect different sectors of space, living out their own lives with their own people. And Luke found the principles of Qui-Gon Jinn in listening to the will of the Living Force. The Living Force taught Luke great patience, discernment when faced with difficult decisions. But one of the best parts about the character of Luke is that despite all of this development, he was not perfect. He still gave into his emotions and his feelings. A great example of this is the Sith Lady Lumaya. For the longest time, Luke believed that Lumaya was not evil, and had tried again and again to get her to embrace the light as his father had. But when Mara Jade was killed, and all the evidence stacked up against Lumaya as being the murderer of Luke's wife, Luke could not contain himself. He hunted her down without looking at the facts, and he executed her in cold blood through sheer rage. But later, he learned that it had been Jason who killed Mara. Luke was distraught at himself for having given in to his darker side. He thought he had learned so much, and yet was still a child, acting out of emotion and rage. For penance, Luke Skywalker entered a deep meditation. He looked through peace through the Force, and through washing his hands of vengeance, refused to deal with Jason any longer. There were not very many Jedi who can say that they had this kind of restraint. It wasn't that Luke couldn't kill Jason, it's that he refused to for his own soul's sake. Luke is powerful. He's one of the strongest characters in any fictional medium. But the best part about Luke is his strength of character. He had the strength tested through a crucible of trials. He would lose friends and family to his great enemies, and he had to make a lot of decisions that would not sit well. But Luke found another kind of strength. The dark side rewards those who seek power with more power as long as they will do anything to attain it. But the light is the opposite. The Force rewards those who don't desire power, looking instead to have an understanding. It is those who do not desire power that are the most deserving of it. And it is because of this principle that Luke Skywalker ended with tremendous amounts of power in the Force. More than any other Jedi or Sith in history. More than Vitiate. More than Vader. More than Palpatine, more than Yoda. During Dark Empire, 6 years after the Battle of Endor, Luke enters a battlefield shrouded in Force energy, putting up barriers so powerful around him that it blocked 2 cannon shots from an AT-AT. He ignited his lightsaber, deflecting the cannon fire right back into the walker's face. Extending his hand, the massive machine of war collapsed to the ground. This is just a taste of the vast power that Luke had. Luke can conjure Force illusions of himself so convincing that even his own sister fails to recognize the difference. And in Legends, this didn't kill him. He was also able to cast his image across the galaxy, delivering a message of hope to the Rebel Alliance. It was said that Luke had become the essence of a Jedi, and that even the resurrected Palpatine admitted that Luke Skywalker could surpass him very easily. Not too long after this, Luke became strong enough to completely conceal a 1,500 meter long ship, having it vanish in the Force. In the realm of the mind, Luke had no equal. He could shut off the minds of those who had a superior intellect to him. And not only this, but he had mastered communicating with all of the Jedi in the galaxy telepathically, summoning them all to him. Every Jedi Master, Knight, or Padawan stopped what they were doing to answer the summoning of the Grand Master. Luke's telekinesis was on an entirely different level from anyone else. He was able to use the Force to single-handedly pilot the entire Millennium Falcon. He telekinetically filled the roles of pilot, co-pilot, and gunner, weaving through a space battle, scoring hits on all of his enemy fighters. During a large food fight in the Jedi Academy's mess hall, Luke caused every morsel of food, every drop of liquid being thrown to freeze in air. He could use telekinesis on a mass scale. He could achieve things that Starkiller could only dream of. Luke once completely reconstructed one of Vader's fortresses by simply picturing it within his mind. He manipulated tons of Durasteel plating and foundations of buried ground and ocean to reassemble the entire structure in minutes. When he was done, the Citadel itself measured the size of a mountain, and later, Luke would destroy this very castle, hurling it deep into the ocean. But we're just getting started. He once used the Force to pin Jacen Solo, Darth Caedus, to a chair. This is insane, because Luke had mentioned that Caedus had the potential to be stronger than Vader, and that Luke even believed that he was more dangerous than Vader was. But when he did this, Luke didn't move, he didn't gesture, he didn't even look at Darth Caedus. The boy was unmovably pinned to his chair, feeling a weight that he had never experienced. Caedus described it as being sent into hyperspace continually, one of the most powerful Force sensitives ever, and he was literally powerless to resist the Grand Master. This shocked the mighty Sith Lord. He realized the only thing standing between him and instantaneous death was Luke's restraint. But Luke's greatest telekinetic feat has yet to come. Starkiller may have brought down a Star Destroyer, but Luke manipulated a black hole in space. Luke opened himself to the Force, traced out all the edges of where the void was, and he managed to move that void, using it to intercept weapons from the Yuuzhan Vong, swallow their fleet whole. And this was while the Vong were actively attempting to use their weaponry to manipulate the black hole as well. So Luke wrestled control of the anomaly out of their grasp and then used it against them. Luke also had mastered older abilities, such as Plo Koon's Electric Judgment, the Jedi variant of Force Lightning, but Luke created the new ability Emerald Lightning. Since Luke had experienced the full strength of real Sith lightning from Sidious, he could conjure his own sparks through the Force, but using feelings of justice rather than hate. They were green in color and was extremely powerful. Luke once shot the Yuuzhan Vong warrior with his Emerald Lightning, felling him like a tree. Keep in mind, this particular warrior had lightsaber resistant skin, but was dropped instantly by Luke's lightning. Luke was also more familiar with the esoteric Force. Luke once casually mentioned that he had mastered the Aang-Ti ability to fold space. This power allowed him to fold the fabric of space to pass himself or other objects from one location to another. Basically, Luke mastered teleportation. But with all of this said, we don't even scratch the surface of Luke's feats and powers in this video today. Luke's understanding of the Force was so vast in his older age, no one ever really knew how powerful he was. Despite all the feats that we mentioned, Luke doesn't really flex his power that often at all. He keeps it humbly and wisely hidden away. His niece Jaina Solo once believed that she hadn't even seen half of Luke's true power, maybe not even a quarter of it. He had begun as a simple farmer boy, on a backwater world that no one cared about. But Luke had grown to fulfill the potential of the Chosen One. In Star Wars, and in the galaxy, there was never a Jedi like Luke Skywalker before, and there will never be one like him after. But how does this incredible man end his life, end his story? He learned the true nature of the Force, becoming one with it for a period of time. He nearly passed on into the actual realm of the Force, but in the process he learned the nature of the light and the dark side. Luke achieved the first complete and total understanding of the Force, and if he had wanted to, he could have become a godlike being, levels in the Force surpassing the ones of Mortis, surpassing any Sith, any Jedi. But Luke managed to bring himself back from this. Luke never wanted this. He wanted to return to his home, to his family. The same farm boy that long ago didn't desire power, still didn't want it here. All he had to do was reach out, claim it. But that was never who Luke was. Luke Skywalker ended his final adventure in a cantina, sitting at a table with friends, sharing a drink, and reminiscing of the past. Luke Skywalker is the ultimate Jedi. There is no contest, there's no debate. But he wasn't the ultimate Jedi because of his inspiring power. It was because of his heart. The lessons were the greatest part of his legacy, the reason he was able to keep growing, evolving. Luke never became stagnant for long because he was always bouncing back when he was knocked down. He wouldn't hide away on some island somewhere for the rest of his life as the galaxy around him tore itself apart. Luke wasn't afraid of the power of the Force or the potential of an individual. He cultivated power. It was given to him, but he cultivated it with hope, patience, peace, and most importantly, love. Luke Skywalker and Qui-Gon Jinn share remarkable similarities in both their philosophy and approach to the Force, making them kindred spirits across different generations of Jedi. Both were independent thinkers who placed personal connection to the Force above rigid adherence to Jedi orthodoxy. Qui-Gon defied the Jedi Council when he felt their decision did not align with the will of the Force, a quality that Luke Skywalker admired and shared. Luke himself made bold decisions that went against the advice of Yoda and Obi-Wan, such as seeking to redeem Darth Vader rather than destroy the Sith. Their mutual belief in trusting the Force over dogma underscores their alignment as Jedi who acted according to their conviction rather than old tradition. And today, we'll be breaking down the deep connection between Luke Skywalker and Qui-Gon Jinn, what the Grand Master thought of Qui-Gon, discussing various theories about the connection between Qui-Gon and Luke, and also discuss how Grand Master Luke Skywalker diverged from the teachings of Qui-Gon Jinn, and where he disagreed with him. But first, we have sensed something. Only those who seek knowledge will find it. Answer the call of the Force, subscribe, and unlock the ancient secrets of the Jedi Order and the Sith Empire. The archives are open and waiting. And to our longtime students of the archives, your dedication to exploring the vast depths of the galaxy's knowledge is the mark of true mastery. Whether you walk the path of the Jedi or study the ways of the Sith, your presence keeps the Force in balance, and the archives alike. Thank you for being the guardians of these secrets, and the seekers of ever greater wisdom. Now, let us begin. Luke Skywalker deeply respected Qui-Gon for his ability to see the true potential in Anakin. While the High Council doubted Anakin, viewing him as dangerous, Qui-Gon saw him as the chosen one, destined to bring balance to the Force. Luke would later share the same perspective, seeing the good in Anakin after he even became Vader. Qui-Gon's faith in Anakin resonated with Luke deeply, who mirrored the same hope and compassion by saving his father from the dark side. Luke regarded Qui-Gon as a figure of immense wisdom, someone who embodied the Jedi's highest ideals, believing in redemption and the power of the individual to shape their own destiny. Despite his admiration though, Luke never attempted to reach out to Qui-Gon in the Force, assuming that Qui-Gon had fully passed on as all beings eventually must. By the time Luke began to rediscover the history of the Jedi, exploring ancient teachings, Qui-Gon's story was one of legend, passed down as part of the lore of the Old Republic. It is true Qui-Gon had learned to manifest his consciousness in the Force, but Luke's path focused on rebuilding something new rather than reaching back into the long-distant past, at least to him. This explains why Luke never attempted to commune with Qui-Gon directly, though the older Jedi's legacy would undoubtedly influence Luke's philosophy. There is a popular theory that Luke may have used Qui-Gon Jinn's kyber crystal in constructing his own green lightsaber. The idea stems from the fact that Luke's lightsaber debuted in Return of the Jedi with a striking green blade, symbolizing a new era of the Jedi. While intriguing, this theory has been debunked, and in canon the green crystal in Luke's lightsaber is more closely tied to Yoda's teachings rather than Qui-Gon. Yoda's profound connection to Luke Skywalker and his role as his mentor imprinted the blade with a significance, representing Luke's rise as the first of a new Jedi. Because of this, in canon, the green blade symbolizes not just tradition, but also an evolution of the Jedi, bridging the past and the future as one. The passing of the mantle. In Legends continuity, or the EU, Luke constructed his lightsaber with a different, more challenging context. Unable to find a natural kyber crystal in the aftermath of the rise of the Empire, Luke resorted to an ancient Sith technique to create a synthetic crystal. This reflected Luke Skywalker's adaptability and ingenuity, as well as his determination to honor Jedi tradition in the galaxy where resources were now scarce. It also showed his willingness to tread unconventional paths, much like Qui-Gon in his era. The symbolic nature of Luke's green lightsaber aligns with Qui-Gon's own use of a green blade. The green lightsaber is associated with wisdom, balance, a deep intrinsic connection to the Force. Both Jedi use their sabers not as tools of aggression, but as extensions of their belief in the Force's guidance. This shared symbolism reinforces their philosophical alignment, each Jedi representing a bridge between the old and the new. Luke Skywalker, like Qui-Gon Jinn, believed in adapting Jedi teachings to meet the needs of the present, while remaining faithful to the Force's larger, greater, cosmic, and living will. Luke and Qui-Gon's similarities tie into their shared belief in individuality of the Jedi and the importance of compassion in shaping the Order and the galaxy. And the way Qui-Gon Jinn thought is the foundation in which Luke would construct the future of the Jedi. While Luke shared many philosophical similarities with Qui-Gon though, they also had key important differences in their viewpoints and approaches to the Jedi path, which I think are just as compelling. One big divergence was their stance on attachment. Qui-Gon Jinn here was more of a traditionalist, believing that attachment could be dangerous, as he adhered tightly to the Jedi code, and also compelled Obi-Wan to do the same. Qui-Gon believed that this was essential to prevent emotional entanglement from clouding judgment. But Luke, however, took a much different approach, especially in the EU. Luke saw the value of attachment and family, and he believed that love and connection strengthened a Jedi rather than weakening them. Luke's relationship with his sister and eventual marriage to Mara Jade demonstrated his belief that attachment, when approached with balance, inspired hope, resilience, and a great power. Another difference is their view on destiny and prophecy. Qui-Gon Jinn's strong belief in the prophecy of the Chosen One and his unwavering faith in Anakin reflected his trust in the grand design of the light. Luke, while influenced by destiny through his own journey, tended to focus more on individual agency and choice. Luke believed that people had the power to shape their own future, regardless of prophecy. This guided his decision to redeem Vader, as Luke felt that it was his father's actions, not the mere predetermined role, that would ultimately determine his fate. Luke may have admired Qui-Gon's faith in the Force, but viewed his reliance on prophecy as limiting and overly idealistic. He also had a much different view on the future of the Jedi. Qui-Gon believed deeply in rooting himself in the moment, focusing on the living force, responding to immediate needs rather than long-term planning. Luke also greatly valued intuition and presence in the moment. His role as the restorer of the Jedi Order forced him to think strategically about the Jedi's survival and evolution though. Luke wrestled with how to integrate the lessons of the past with the needs of a brand new era, blending ancient Jedi principles with his own innovations. Qui-Gon, by contrast, seemed content to act as an individual Jedi without any concern for broader legacy of the Order, making their priorities very different. Despite these differences though, Luke Skywalker regarded Qui-Gon Jinn as a legendary Jedi, although he understood why individuals like Yoda considered him to be more of a rogue and a lone wolf. If Qui-Gon Jinn was a Jedi under Luke, Luke likely would have set him off in the wider galaxy to fulfill his purpose, realizing that Luke's place was as the Grand Master and Qui-Gon's as a wandering warrior and protector of the light. Luke appreciated Qui-Gon for his profound insight and wisdom. His ability to see past the surface and focus on the essence of others, such as recognizing Anakin, made him a figure of profound respect, especially to Luke. Qui-Gon's independence from the Council also stood out as a mark of integrity and a deep understanding of the Force. Luke admired his courage to defy the authority of the Council and believed it was necessary, as Luke himself often took a similar stance when faced with moral dilemma. For Luke, Qui-Gon Jinn embodied the ideal Jedi who balanced personal conviction with service to the Force. Luke felt a spiritual connection to Qui-Gon through a rich lineage of the Jedi. As the apprentice of Obi-Wan and the son of Anakin Skywalker, Luke was deeply tied to Qui-Gon's legacy. This lineage connected Qui-Gon in a profound way to the Grand Master, even if they never met. For Luke, Qui-Gon represented the ideals of wisdom that a Jedi should have at their best, a reminder of what the Jedi could and should be. Even in the darkest of eras, the Jedi light shone through. Through this connection, Luke carried forward Qui-Gon Jinn's great legacy, forging a new path for the Jedi in a galaxy that was now forever changed. Qui-Gon Jinn was the living embodiment of the Force's will, a maverick Jedi whose understanding of the Force transcended the rigid doctrine of the Jedi. His unwavering faith in the living Force, the interconnectedness of the energy of the galaxy that surrounded him, elected him to act in an instinctive way with clarity and purpose. By discovering and training Anakin, Qui-Gon planted the seed for the galaxy's redemption, even though the path would be wrought with tragedy and death. Qui-Gon's own death removed this stabilizing presence, allowing the Jedi Order to fall deeper into arrogance and complacency. But his teachings lived on in the unseen currents of the Force, waiting to shape the galaxy anew. It was Qui-Gon's mastery of the Force's true nature, his ability to become one with it and retain his consciousness after death, that served as the keystone of the Jedi's survival. Without his teachings, the Jedi would have burned away completely, unable to adapt to the challenges of the Sith's resurgence. His influence shaped Obi-Wan's ability to guide Luke, ensuring the return of a hope when all had seemed lost. For Luke, Qui-Gon was the unseen architect of his journey, the one who laid the foundation for a new understanding. By rejecting the rigidity of the old Jedi Order, Qui-Gon enabled Luke to embrace a more balanced path, forging the legacy of the Jedi anew. In that way, Qui-Gon Jinn was not merely a Jedi, he was the Force's chosen instrument, a figure whose impact rippled far beyond his lifetime, ensuring the survival of the light amidst the darkest of times. We often speak about Luke rejecting the old Jedi way, but Luke became the perfect Jedi Grand Master by embodying the teachings of the old Jedi while transcending their limitation. Under the guidance of Kenobi and Yoda, Luke learned the core principles of the Jedi: self-discipline, compassion, and a commitment to the light. Obi-Wan instilled Luke with a sense of importance of resilience and duty, teaching him to stay true to his purpose, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. From Yoda, Luke absorbed the ancient wisdom of the Force, learning the value of patience, introspection, and the eternal battle against fear and danger, against his own anger. However, Luke Skywalker would not imitate his mentors. He adapted their lessons, combining their strengths while avoiding their rigidity. Luke's greatest fear after becoming Jedi Grandmaster was recreating the mistakes of his teachers. Luke, like Qui-Gon before, recognized the Force itself was his true master, not the Jedi Council or tradition. While Obi-Wan and Yoda emphasized the mistakes of the old Jedi, cautioning Luke to avoid attachment, Luke saw the value in forging meaningful connection, with this being the most overused example, but also because it's the best. Luke's ability to listen to the Force, rather than blindly following the old way, this enabled him to walk a unique path that balanced emotion and wisdom. The intuitive understanding of the Force reflected Qui-Gon Jinn's philosophy, allowing Luke to rebuild the Jedi Order not as an institution, but as a living, evolving tradition embracing the nuances of life and the nuances of the Force. As Grandmaster, Luke became the culmination of the old Jedi's legacy, combining their teachings with his own insight to forge a bright future. He embodied Obi-Wan's perseverance, Yoda's wisdom, and Qui-Gon Jinn's harmony with the Force, creating Jedi that were adaptable, compassionate, and resilient. By trusting the Force as his ultimate guide, Luke avoided the pitfalls of the past, attempting to understand the balance of the galaxy, the light and the dark shaping it. Through Luke, the wisdom of the old Jedi would endure, but it was Luke's ability to surpass these limitations that made him the perfect Jedi and a beacon of hope for generations to come. Luke Skywalker stands as a symbol of unwavering hope and resilience, embodying the Jedi's ideals at their highest and their most aspirational. As the Grandmaster of a new order, he overcame immense trial, rebuilding the Jedi after their near extinction, while facing threats such as the Yuzhong Vong. Luke's journey inspires us because he represents the triumph of faith, determination, and compassion over despair, showing that even in the darkest of times, the Force's light endures. Discussing Legends Luke allows us to celebrate the depth of his character and his pivotal role as the galaxy's beacon for unrelenting hope. A hero who not only upheld the legacy of the Jedi, but transitioned it into something even greater. Each opportunity to explore his story is a chance to reflect and look back on why he remains one of the most profound figures in all of Star Wars lore. But anyway, Luke Skywalker's journey as a Jedi was not one that came abruptly. His tenure as Jedi Grandmaster and Hero of the Galaxy lasted well into old age. Luke spent his entire life going on adventures to save the galaxy time and time again, and because of that, he was exceptionally concerned about it upon his retirement, or worse, upon his death. In one of Luke Skywalker's final struggles, he faced the horrific entity known as Abeloth, and during that crisis, the Galactic Alliance itself threatened to tear apart due to the Imperials and the government attempting to gain control of the Jedi Order. They nearly almost succeeded in spreading a vast anti-Jedi rhetoric to the whole public at large. Upon seeing how the galaxy reacted to this, Luke crafted his holocron and finally gave one big warning to both his Jedi and the public at large before the Grandmaster retired. And today, we are going to be opening Luke Skywalker's Jedi holocron, listening to that very message. So welcome to the archives, my friends, and let us begin. Here are the final words recorded by Luke Skywalker. There are some wars that only a Jedi can fight. After Darth Caedus' defeat, we mediated the appointment of Natasi Dalla as Chief of State of the Galactic Alliance, and Jagged fell as Regent of the Imperial Remnant. Whatever their flaws, and Dalla had many, they were the right leaders to oversee the long process of reuniting the galaxy. 2 years later, I have chose to respect Dalla's commitment to peace and justice, and have chosen to exile myself. I thought the Force wanted me to discover Jacen Solo's fate, and to show that the Jedi could act without my leadership. Instead though, I have discovered threats that only a Jedi can oppose. The first threat was a lost tribe of the Sith from the forgotten world of Kesh. They were building a powerful war fleet, one made more powerful by the dark strength of every warrior serving in their armada. Yet, there was an even greater opponent, the mysterious entity known as Abeloth. Such enemies are the Jedi's business. I have seen what happens when beings attempt to fight them without the Force as their ally. Only a Jedi, answering always as to the Force's will, were able to pierce the shroud of Abeloth's will and push back the darkness. When Dorvan, the Chief of State, had much to contend with, But for me, the lessons of the struggles on Coruscant and in the Maw are clear. The challenges we face and the mysteries we must explore are bound up with the Force, not Mandalorians or Moffs. Abeloth is an entity from a much older order than the Sith. We must understand her origins and the nature of the ones my father encountered long ago. But by doing so, perhaps we will find a way to destroy her. Or perhaps we will learn that the will of the Force calls us to keep her at bay, or to acknowledge her role in the galaxy and to forge a new order. And we must learn the truth about this latest incarnation of the Sith. Who is the dark man that came to my aid against Abeloth? What has become of Vestera Kai and Ship? And what is the meaning of Jason's vision? The answers will not be found on Coruscant, or emerge from service of the Galactic Alliance. To find them, we must withdraw from Coruscant, to distance ourselves from the galaxy. I said at the beginning of this entry that there are some wars that only a Jedi can fight, and that is true. But it's also true that only the Jedi can restore balance to the Force, and to do so, we must dedicate ourselves completely to the light. Okay, so a lot is said here by Luke, and we're going to break it all down, starting with the main idea behind the speech. Luke Skywalker's point was exactly what he said to bookend the beginning of the passage. There are some wars that only the Jedi can fight. In his long life, Luke Skywalker has seen the Force has very heavy hand in the motions of the galaxy. Many threats arrive to tamper with those motions, to use the Force to destroy or to dominate. These enemies can only be fought by those who have the Force as their ally and can listen to its will. But not only this, it is the Jedi's business to maintain peace and balance in the Force. Government, militaries, politics, and bureaucracy has absolutely no place in such a conflict. In fact, none who cannot feel the Force have any place fighting Abeloth. Not only are they ill-equipped to make decisions on behalf of the situation, as they cannot feel the shifting currents of the Force, and therefore be informed of the current course of action, but their lack of sensitivity puts them in great danger. Abeloth was making munch fungus loaf out of every non-Force sensitive that she encountered. Her mere presence could almost melt them if she desired to. Their minds were hopelessly enslaved to her will. She was the most powerful thing that the galaxy had seen in thousands of years. At the end of the Fate of the Jedi series, one of Luke's final actions as Grand Master of the Order was to organize the search for the Dagger of Mortis. This weapon, the only one of its kind, could slay the Ones, biting through their immortality as it did the daughter with Anakin. Luke theorized that since Abeloth originated from the Ones of Mortis, that this dagger could be the key to destroying her when she returned in the distant future. To this day, it is uncertain whether or not the Jedi Order succeeded in this singular mission, but nevertheless, Luke found it to be one of such importance that he wanted the Jedi Order dedicated fully to it. But not just the search for the dagger, but the uncovering of the mystery of what Abeloth was. As it was said that the only one who can perceive the Force and remain in the light and have any business searching out the mysteries are those that are bound to the currents of the Force. Only the Jedi. Luke believed that the Jedi had been appointed now to hold Abeloth at bay whenever she returned. But with the revelation comes the most shocking decision that Luke executes. For tens of thousands of years, ever since 25,100 BBY, the Jedi Order have been the guardians of peace and justice in the Republic. But Luke makes a historical decision to have the Jedi Order cut ties to the Galactic Alliance, the government body that replaced the New Republic. At that end, he says that the answer to the mysteries will not be found on Coruscant, and they won't emerge so long as the Jedi are in service to the Galactic Alliance. The threat of Abeloth was so huge, and discovering the dagger was of so much importance, that Luke decreed the Jedi Order to distance itself from the government in all of their petty disputes, to break away from what they swore to protect. Imagine Mace Windu's reaction. This is a legendary decision. It seems to go against everything the Jedi Order stood for. But this was not true. This was Luke returning the Jedi to their ancient roots, keeping the balance of the Force rather than the balance of government. This government had turned against them time and time again. First with Order 66, and then the Galactic Empire. Then again with Natasi Dalla, when she spread the anti-Jedi rhetoric and put the Jedi Temple on Coruscant under direct siege. This goes to show just how easily the Imperial Remnant and the Galactic Alliance were able to twist the script on how the public viewed and perceived the Jedi. It is because of this that Luke saw the Jedi were killing themselves to serve a public that would turn on them at the drop of a hat. He couldn't in good conscience subject the Jedi Order to another purge while they were out searching for the Dagger of Mortis, or trying to discover the origin of Abeloth. Their mission now was beyond any Republic. And with this, Luke withdrew his Jedi from Coruscant and brought them back to their ancestral homeworld of Ossus. This brings the history of the Jedi full circle. It was on Ossus where the Jedi promised to defend the Republic, and it was there when Luke severed that agreement. And it was this severance that would remain for 100 years into the future. Now, this isn't to say that the Jedi just kept to themselves and stopped helping the galaxy at large. Quite the opposite, actually. The Jedi aided the Galactic Alliance by mediating peace deals, reversing the damage done by the Yuuzhan Vong. However, the Jedi ceased to take on any governmental roles and were no longer bound to the Senate or their approval for anything. This came at the cost of having marshal-like authority in the galaxy though, a changing of the guard. Jedi technically didn't have the ability to act on behalf of the law. However, the Galactic Alliance overlooked this little tidbit because they wanted to get as much help from the Jedi as possible, especially since the Jedi Order's job was now so much bigger, and they were no longer directly bound to serving the Republic. And 137 years after the Battle of Yavin, things were very similar to how they used to be. The Jedi still remained largely secluded on Ossus, and were even protected by the new Empire under Roan Fel. It's difficult to imagine any kind of Republic without any Jedi jurisdiction, and I can imagine that Luke's choice was incredibly controversial. However, it was one that was ultimately wise when you consider that the threat of Abeloth wasn't just for the galaxy, but for the entire universe. The Jedi had to devote themselves to the light. Luke needed them to become more powerful than ever, and this couldn't happen if they were distracted by the ongoings of the Galactic Alliance. Luke's final warning to the Jedi Order was that the Jedi needed to dedicate themselves to studying the mysteries of the Force, to uncover them so that they could protect the galaxy, to save it from Abeloth and the Sith. His warning to the galaxy was to stay out of this, to stay away from this Jedi task. But also, if there was ever any threat that arose on the horizon with which the Force was necessary, that it was the Jedi's business to take care of it, and that the government needed to respect that at all cost. For all of Luke's questions, specifically regarding the Dark Man that helped him against Abeloth, we actually have the answer. What he speaks of is a strange event where a Sith actually arrived to back up Luke during his battle with the entity Abeloth. This Sith man was Darth Krayt, who emerged from the shadows to ensure that the galaxy would not be destroyed before he could rule it. He believed that the Jedi were ineffectual to keep the galaxy safe, but he did respect Luke Skywalker, so he helped him. As for the other two questions regarding the Kai ship and the vision of Jacen Solo, we won't go into that in today's holocron, as they deserve full entries of their own. But with that, the final word and warning of Luke Skywalker, the one that he issued not only to his Jedi, but to the entire galaxy. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. This is the mantra by which the Jedi have eaten, slept, and breathed for tens of thousands of years. It is one of the first things that every trainee must learn as they walk in the halls of the Jedi Temple. And of course, it was one of the things taught to Luke Skywalker on Dagobah by Grandmaster Yoda. Back then, Luke had been brash and eager to rush into conflicts head first, but Yoda had to temper his adventurous spirit with the Jedi way and code, so Yoda acted with wisdom and discernment. But the day would come when Luke Skywalker achieved a wisdom and began teaching his own students in his own way, and when that day came, Luke appears to believe that Yoda had misinterpreted a precept of the Jedi Code and the Jedi's overall view on detachment. So join us today, students of the Force, as we kneel at the feet of Master Skywalker's holocron and learn why Luke Skywalker changed how the Jedi Code was read. But first, level up your galactic style, as on the Star Wars merch page thanks to Black Friday, the site-wide is 50% off, and if you use code WAVE at checkout, you'll get an additional 15% off your whole order. It really helps out the channel if you use the link in the description down below, so if you want to check out some Star Wars merch for yourself or someone else for the holidays, that would be awesome. Regardless, thanks so much for watching the videos, and now, let us open Master Skywalker's holocron. When we mention the Jedi Code, we aren't specifically talking about lines within the mantra itself, but the greater meaning. Specifically when it mentions that there is no passion, there is serenity. Passion often implies intense emotions of want and desire, things that lead to attachment. Jedi are taught that it is their way to detach themselves from the physical galaxy around them, to become totally enmeshed within the Force. Detachment has been a fundamental truth almost since the very inception of the Jedi, and it was one of the things that Yoda championed in his own teachings. The Jedi were well aware that the way of the Force, the way of the universe, was that everything comes to pass, and for this very reason they were not supposed to form emotional attachment. Holding on to a person or a thing beyond its time was the path of misery, putting one's own selfish desire against the will of the galaxy and against the will of the Force. Thus the Jedi had to let go of everything that they feared to lose, to surrender attachment to persons and things that passed out of their life. The fear of loss led to the dark side as proven by Anakin, who was set down a path of darkness by the loss of his mother, triggering his fear of losing his wife. Yoda was terrified of history repeating itself, teaching Luke not only the words of the Jedi Code, but their meanings as well. One of these meetings was to let go of all that he feared to lose, a lesson that Yoda once tried to teach to Anakin. When Luke saw his friend suffering and dying on Cloud City though, he was deeply distressed. But Yoda insisted that he remain behind to continue training. Luke exacerbatedly asked his master if he was just supposed to let them all die, and Yoda shockingly says, "If you honor what they fight for, yes." Luke initially agreed, but was never able to get the images of their suffering out of his mind, so he decided to ignore the advice of the Grand Master and to go to Bespin. All the while, Yoda attempted to talk him out of it, believing that if he rushed off in emotion, then he would be easily seduced by Vader. But as the years went on, Luke came to find his friends and family as a source of true power. He was never tempted towards the dark side over their fear of loss, but rather empowered by his love and desire to be with them. After all, it was this love that rescued Vader, and even Luke himself during the Dark Empire crisis. It was actually during Palpatine's resurrection that Luke got a hold of an ancient Jedi holocron, one that belonged to Vodo Siosk Boss, the former master of Exar Kun, a Jedi who had lived during the olden days of the Old Republic. Back during Master Vodo's day, the Jedi did things much differently than they did in Yoda's time and during the Clone Wars. In this era, they had permitted marriage and love. The Jedi were allowed to have families and live outside of the Order so long as they responded when called. And although their capital was on Ossus, they were not centralized to a single planet. Unfortunately though, very few records existed of how the Jedi conducted themselves during the days that predated Luke, and the only order that Luke could go off of was this ancient method of Ossus. Because the ancient Jedi permitted marriage, Luke found his own strength and family, and he decided to completely rethink Yoda's ideals, specifically what detachment in the Jedi Code really meant. Luke believed that as the current Grand Master, it was his job to read the code and interpret it as he saw fit. Luke discovered that it was possible to love without attachment. In the words of Jedi Knight Siri Tachi, the method was to love without wanting to possess or to influence, to cherish without keeping, to have without holding. This now only left the principle of detachment from the physical reality that the Jedi were meant to have. What did that mean if it wasn't purely a reference to one's emotional relationship? Well, in the EU novel Dark Apprentice, we get an insight into how Luke Skywalker interpreted this line of the Jedi Code, specifically when he's guiding his students through meditation, giving them the Jedi Code that was taught to him by Yoda. The book says this: Luke heard mingling voices as the 12 others repeated his words. But this was too formal, too stiff, and stilted. Luke wanted them to understand him, not to memorize mantras. Luke said, "Right now you are floating in warmth and near darkness. Imagine yourselves totally immersed, surrounded, free. Let your minds wander of their own accord. Travel along the ripples of the Force. Feel the Force," he said in a whisper. Then he repeated these words with greater strength. "Feel the Force. You are a part of it. You can travel with the Force, down into the core of the moon, out into the stars. Every living thing strengthens the Force, and everything draws strength from it. Concentrate with me. Observe the limitless vistas your skill will show you." Luke was showing his students what the detachment from the physical world meant: freedom in the Force, a connection to the cosmic energies of life and the power that surrounds it. To fully understand, here is something from the perspective of one of Luke's students, Kip Duran. Kip felt the creatures in the jungle, traced their ripples in the great tapestry of the Force. He smelled the plants and flowers and small creatures in the rainforest. He felt the tidal vibrations of the gas giant Yavin and its other moons as he extended his thoughts towards space. He felt at peace, a part of the cosmos itself. When we totally focus and come to peace, fully pledge yourself to the Force, a Jedi is able to leave behind their physical vessel, to perceive moments and vibrations of everything in great and small detail. from the skittering of insects to the gravitational fluxes of celestial bodies. This was the way of detachment that Luke had known, and when a Jedi achieves this state of mindfulness in battle, their body simply becomes a conduit of the Force. They are able to move and act instinctively, taking only as much action as the Force deems necessary in the moment, with the deadliest timing and precision. In the same way that a spider senses the things that they interact with in their web via vibrations, a Jedi can sense any subtle movement or inclinations within the Force and act accordingly, using sub-relativistic speeds. Obi-Wan knew this extremely well. He had learned to detach oneself from the physical body and the soul, to meld to the Force, acting at the speed of thought. In the novel for Revenge of the Sith, this is how Obi-Wan felt meeting Grievous on the Bridge of the Invisible Hand. The Force flows over him and around him as though he has stepped into a crystal pure waterfall, one lost in the green coils of a forgotten rainforest. When he opens himself to the sparkling stream, it flows into him and through him and out again without the slightest interference. No conscious will. The part of him that calls itself Obi-Wan Kenobi is no more than a ripple, an eddy in the pool into which he endlessly pours. There are other parts of him here as well. There is nothing here that is not a part of him, from the scuff mark of R2-D2's dome, to the tattered hem of Palpatine's robe, from the spidering crack in one of the transparent steel panels of the curving view wall above to the great starships, those that still battled in the great beyond. Because this is all a part of the Force. He is both of the lightsabers that the other droids march forward to offer to Grievous, and he is the General himself. He is the General's geranium ribs. He is the beating of Grievous's alien heart, and is the silent pulse of oxygen pumping through his alien veins. He is the greedy anticipation that captured weapons sparked behind the General's eyes. He is even the plan for his own execution, simmering now within the General's brain. He is all of these things, but most important, he is still Obi-Wan Kenobi. And when General Grievous attacks him, this is how it appeared to Obi-Wan in the Force. The electro drives that powered Grievous's limbs could move them faster than the human eye can see. When he swung his arm, it and his fist and the lightsaber within it would literally vanish. No human being could move remotely as fast as General Grievous, not even Obi-Wan. But Obi-Wan didn't have to. In the Force, part of him was Grievous's intent to slaughter, and the surge from intent to action translated to Obi-Wan's response without thought. He had no need for a plan, no use for tactics. Obi-Wan had the Force. Obi-Wan was able to react faster than the speed of thought, to use the Force to spring the electro drives in Grievous's fingers, forcing him to drop the lightsaber before it slashed Obi-Wan in half. At the same time, he had also sensed R2-D2 was going to cause a distraction. He knew Anakin would retrieve their weapons from Grievous's cloak. The reason we read all of that was to visualize exactly what it looked like when a Jedi perfectly detached themselves from the physical and immersed their being into the Force. This was the detachment that Luke would teach to his students. The reason that Obi-Wan was untouchable as the master of Sarisu in defensive combat was the same reason that Luke would later go on to become a master of the lightsaber himself. In the realm of the Force, nothing was too big or too complicated. It was you, the infinite present, and your consciousness becoming synonymous to the energies of the Force itself, all of which can come back in full complete detachment, but not the word meaning avoiding of relationships, but detachment from all inhibition, detachment from limit, the limits that someone puts on their own minds, within themselves, the part of them that believes that the task is too large, too difficult. In the Force, there is no such thing as this. The limits of the body mean nothing, and you can simply become the problem at hand, unravel it from within at the speed of a thought. That is the Force as Luke knew it. Now, of course, Obi-Wan had mastered this. Surely Yoda would have as well. While Yoda had 800 years to discover the meaning of detachment, Luke figured it out after rejecting Yoda's teaching, learning for himself. One of the reasons Luke began to teach his own students in a more hands-off way was because of this. He broke the rigidity of the former Jedi Order. Luke didn't want their noses in scrolls and holocrons all day. He knew that without practice and action, that theory meant nothing. He taught his students one lesson a day, or even a week, and then they had to take the time to explore from there, to gain a complete understanding of it, the Jedi principles, through the Force. This was the path that created some of the most powerful Jedi in history, Luke's very students. And this all came from simply changing perspectives on what Yoda had taught Luke before. What did detachment from self really mean? Luke highly respected and loved Yoda and Obi-Wan. He began by having his students learn the Force the exact same way that he had been taught on Dagobah. But Luke would not be insincere. He would teach exactly what he had learned. Very soon we'll be seekers of knowledge. Today I invite you to unlock the holocron that tells the tale of the greatest Jedi that ever lived, Luke Skywalker. His name reverberates across the galaxy, a symbol of hope, redemption, and the power of the light side. But his story is more than a legend. It is a guide, a beacon for all who walk the path of the Jedi Order. From his humble beginnings on Tatooine, to his triumphs against the darkness that once consumed his family, Luke's journey is one of courage, selflessness, and profound connection to the Force. As you listen, remember that his greatness was not measured by the power that he wielded, but the wisdom and humility in which he wielded it. Let us honor his memory as we delve into the story of a Jedi, but not just any Jedi, one who redefined what it meant to use the Force. But our holocron doesn't begin from Luke's perspective. It begins with that of his master, Yoda. Yoda's initial fear of training Luke stemmed from the lingering scars of the Jedi Order's downfall. Having witnessed Skywalker, Luke's father, succumb to the temptations of the dark, Yoda knew all too well the danger of training someone with such strong emotional ties and latent potential and power. Anakin's betrayal had cost the Jedi dearly, and the similarities between father and son were undeniable. Yoda feared that Luke's impulsive nature and deep attachment to his friends would make him vulnerable, and that if he wasn't careful, he would walk the same path. The burden of responsibility weighed heavily on Yoda. Yoda knew that if Luke fell, it would mean the final extinction of the Jedi. This manifested in Yoda's harsh and an uncompromising training method with Luke. Unlike the structured and disciplined upbringing of younglings that they received at the temple, Luke was thrown into an intense, accelerated training program, one that left little room for any error. Yoda's strict demeanor and cryptic teachings were deliberate, aiming to test Luke's resolve and forcing him to confront his weaknesses head on. Where other Jedi may have nurtured and guided, Yoda pushed Luke to his absolute limits, hoping to instill the discipline and wisdom that Anakin had lacked. It wasn't just about preparing Luke to face Darth Vader. It was about ensuring that Luke had the strength of character to resist the dark side. Interestingly, Yoda initially considered Leia as a safer option to train as a Jedi. Leia shared the same Skywalker bloodline as Luke, but her personality was markedly different. Where Luke was impulsive and emotional, Leia was disciplined, pragmatic, and politically savvy. Yoda saw in Leia a steadier and a more reliable candidate for a Jedi, someone less prone to the volatile emotions that would lead to a fall. However, Leia's deep involvement with the Rebellion, and later her focus on leadership roles in the New Republic, made it impossible to train her. And ultimately, the Force guided Yoda to accept that Luke was the one destined to confront Vader and help restore balance. What set Luke apart was ultimately what made him the best Jedi. This was his willingness to acknowledge, to learn from the mistakes of the past. Unlike the Jedi of the Clone Wars and of the Old Republic, Luke did not view their teachings as infallible. He recognized the dogmatic flaws that had blinded the Jedi and contributed to its destruction. When Luke faced failure or moments of doubt, he did not shy away from them as other Jedi would. Luke embraced them as a part of the process and a part of growth. The humility and openness to change allowed Luke Skywalker to redefine what it meant to be a Jedi, blending compassion, emotional understanding, and discipline in a way that broke free from the rigid constraints of the old Jedi's code. Perhaps most shocking, though, is Yoda came to support Luke's reformation of the Jedi. In his final moments with Luke on Dagobah, Yoda admitted his mistakes. He acknowledged that the old ways were not perfect. Yoda's love for Luke and his faith in the young Skywalker's ability to forgive and to forge a new path shone through in these final moments of the Grand Master. Yoda understood that the future of the Jedi did not lie in repeating the past, but by evolving it. In this way, Yoda's relationship with Luke became a powerful example of mentorship, one grounded in mutual respect and trust, rather than a rigid adherence to tradition and an old, outdated code. Luke's journey ultimately exemplifies the transformative nature of embracing failure and one's own imperfections. By learning from the errors of the Jedi and the failures of the Father, and even the limitations of Yoda, Luke forged a new legacy for the Jedi. His resolve to preserve the ideals of the Jedi by reforming its practices demonstrated a strength that transcended power and skill in the Force. It was Luke Skywalker's humanity, an ability to learn, to adapt, to forgive. This is what made Luke the greatest Jedi, not his power. A source of pride for Yoda. Yoda finally saw hope restored to the galaxy through his final pupil. But Luke's ascension to a power level unparalleled in Force history was a culmination of his strong bloodline, his unwavering focus, and a deep connection to the light side. Luke was born of a lineage tied directly to the Force itself. Some may even say that the Force is Luke's own grandparent. But it was not his lineage that defined his destiny. It was his decisions and his choices. Unlike Anakin, Luke resisted the temptation of power and embraced humility, compassion, and selflessness. While on the surface this sounds good for a hero's journey, it's actually a lot more important in the grand Star Wars universe. These qualities resonate directly with the essence of the light side. The light side seeks harmony rather than domination. The Force recognizes Luke's purity of intent, and it chose to elevate him, granting Luke Skywalker abilities that surpass even the most legendary Jedi. The light side does not bestow its power on those who seek it for selfish purpose, a desire for dominance. The light side responds to those who act as its conduit, wielding its power for the greater good without personal gain. Luke Skywalker embodied this principle to perfection. He did not desire power for its own sake, or even to have power to destroy his enemies, but rather to bring balance, to heal a fractured galaxy. This alignment with the light side's core nature allowed the Force to flow through Luke unimpeded. It ascended his abilities to a level that no mortal had ever achieved. And in this way, the Force did not just empower Luke, it worked through him. Luke Skywalker was the light side of the Force's chosen instrument. His unmatched power stemmed not just from his mastery of Jedi technique, but his profound alignment to the light. While other Jedi such as Yoda and Windu represented certain aspects of the Force, Luke Skywalker would come to embody its entirety. His humility allowed him to accept his limitations, relying on the Force's guidance rather than his own innate strength. This deep trust in the light side's wisdom and purpose, this is what elevated Luke to a status beyond a mere Jedi. He became a living symbol of what the Force could achieve when paired with a willing and a selfless conduit. By becoming the embodiment of the light side, Luke transcended the boundaries of what any Jedi or mortal Force wielder had ever accomplished. He didn't just carry on the Jedi's legacy, he redefined it. He aligned himself and the Jedi with the Force's true nature, proving that the true strength lies in selflessness and trust, not in power. Luke's greatest achievement wasn't defeating the Sith or even saving the galaxy. It was his ability to serve the Force without letting it corrupt him. The Force elevated him because he embodied its purest ideals, showing that the greatest power comes not from seeking control, but from surrendering to the will of the light. The legend of Grandmaster Luke Skywalker endures as one of the most powerful and inspiring tales in all of galactic history. As the last Jedi of the Old Order and the first of a renewed one, Luke embodied the ultimate balance between strength, compassion, discipline, and understanding. He was not defined by his power, but by his choice in how he wielded it, proving that the greatest legacy of a Jedi is not their mastery of the Force, but their ability to inspire hope, redemption, and peace. As a teacher, leader, and living conduit of the light side, Luke redefined what it meant to be a Jedi, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. Luke's humility and wisdom made him a beacon of light in a galaxy long shrouded in the dark. Though his mortal life would come to an end, Luke's legend transcends time. It transcends fiction. Luke is a symbol of what is possible. His deeds become a cornerstone of the Jedi Order's rebirth, inspiring future generations to wield the Force with purpose and integrity. Grandmaster Luke Skywalker's legacy is not just one of power, but more importantly of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light will always prevail if someone will but answer its call. As students of the Force, it is our duty to learn from those who came before us, and there is no greater example than Luke. His path was not without failure, nor was it free from struggle, and it is in those moments where his true power would emerge. From his battles against the darkness to the immense power that he wielded with humility and purpose, Luke's story holds lessons for all who seek the way of the Force. Revan's influence on the evolution of the Sith and the broader understanding of the Force is unparalleled, cementing Revan as one of the most important figures in all of the Star Wars mythology. His concept of power, balance, and control directly laid the groundwork for what would become the Rule of Two. As a Dark Lord of the Sith, Revan recognized the inherent flaws in the chaotic infighting of the Sith Order, where ambition and treachery weakened it from within. While he did not formalize the rule of two, his understanding of the importance of singular leadership and focused apprenticeship influenced the philosophy that Darth Bane would later codify. Revan believed that concentrated power, coupled with loyalty between a master and apprentice, could amplify the Sith's ability to achieve their goals, avoiding the self-destructive tendencies of previous empires. This strategic insight demonstrated not only Revan's profound understanding of the dark side, but his unmatched ability to adapt and innovate. Beyond his contributions to the Sith, Revan's holistic view on the Force positioned him as the architect of how future generations would perceive its true nature. Revan's journey through both light and dark sides gave him a rare understanding of the Force as a unified whole rather than a binary struggle. By embracing compassion and strength, love and power, Revan became the first to truly exemplify balance. His philosophies influenced not only the Sith, but also the Jedi Order, whose rigid dogma would later be challenged by figures such as Luke Skywalker. In many ways, Revan's brilliance lay not just in his Force abilities, but in the sharpness of his mind, his tactical genius, his capacity for innovation, and ability to transcend traditional teachings. This made him the mastermind of galactic history, shaping the very way the Force was understood for millennia. Revan's legacy is not just that of what he accomplished, but in how he redefined the very foundation of the Force and how it was viewed by the following generations. Even after the brutal wars that had scarred the galaxy, the Jedi Order could not deny the unparalleled brilliance of Revan. His genius, his mastery of the Force, and his pivotal role in ending the war placed him in a unique paradoxical position within the Jedi collective, especially in their histories. While Revan was revered as a hero who had saved countless lives, they also feared him as a figure who had walked the dangerous line between the light and the dark and failed. Unlike any other Sith of his era, Revan inspired both awe and terror among the Jedi. The Jedi respected his accomplishments, but saw him as a cautionary tale, someone whose ambition and willingness to embrace the dark side had nearly doomed not only him, but the entire galaxy. Revan's ability to challenge their teachings and still emerge as a figure of immense power and insight, though, left the Jedi Order ultimately conflicted about him, forcing them to honor his contributions, while quietly dreading the legacy that he left behind. This tension underscored the impact of Revan's brilliance, showing that even his greatest adversaries could not ignore the profound influence that he had on their philosophy and on the galaxy. But beyond the Jedi and Sith of his era, we want to talk about how Revan influenced Luke Skywalker, and how in many ways, Revan was the Luke before Luke. Revan represents a brief glimpse into the boundless potential of a Force wielder who achieves true understanding. Revan was a visionary, capable of perceiving the Force in its entirety, light and dark, compassion and power, unity and duality. What makes Revan extraordinary is not simply his mastery of Force techniques or combat, but his ability to think beyond the established limits of the Jedi and the Sith. Revan's genius was a reflection of what may be possible if a single individual could fully transcend the binary nature of the Force, wield it with both clarity and balance. Revan's journey suggests that the Force is not a tool for power or peace, but is rather an endless reservoir of potential for those that understand it. Revan's life, though fragmented with darkness and redemption, offers a fleeting vision of what ultimate mastery of the Force looks like and what could be achieved. If Revan had never been dominated by the dark side or had his identity fractured, the limits of his potential would have been unimaginable. Revan's fall to the dark side, while it ultimately deepened his understanding of the Force, it also split his focus. It kept him from achieving the harmony that he had so briefly glimpsed later in life. The burden of his fragmented identity, the Sith Lord who sought domination, the Jedi who sought peace, meant that during this time, Revan was trying to reconcile these two sides rather than fully transcending them. Had Revan been able to bypass this internal struggle, his potential would have been unparalleled, rivaling or even surpassing the greatest wielders of the Force. Revan's fragmented legacy leaves fans wondering, what heights could he have reached if his brilliance was not hampered by the limitations of his era, or the scars of his own choices? Revan's story serves as both an inspiration and caution. Revan and Luke Skywalker share a unique legacy, as the two of them are some of the most powerful Force wielders in galactic history, unified by their unparalleled understanding of the Force. Both transcended the rigid teachings of their respective Jedi eras, embracing attachment, love, balance, achieving extraordinary levels of mastery. Revan's revolutionary discoveries during the Mandalorian Wars would lay the groundwork for a philosophy that Luke Skywalker would fully realize, enabling him to reforge the Jedi Order, cementing his place as the most powerful mortal Force wielder ever. Despite the millennia between Revan and Luke, they would have been kindred spirits, unified by their shared vision, unique vision of the Force. Revan and Luke achieved their incredible power by challenging the Jedi. For Luke, this was rejecting the strict detachment of the old Jedi Order in favor of compassion, an attachment-driven approach to the Force. For Revan, this discovery came during the Mandalorian Wars, where his love for the Republic and his comrades allowed him to harness the Force in ways that neither a Jedi nor Sith could explain. The righteous attachment became the cornerstone of both of their philosophies, showing that love and compassion could elevate one's connection to the Force and that it did not weaken it. Revan's ability to embrace both the light and the dark side was another key to his strength, a path that Luke would later follow. Revan's time as a Sith Lord granted him a deep understanding of the dark side's power, but Revan's redemption allowed him to reconnect with the light side's clarity and compassion. Similarly, Luke forged his own balance, rejecting both the strict ideals of the old Jedi and the corruption of the Sith. Both men saw the Force as a unified whole rather than a binary system, unlocking a deep connection to its limitless potential. Their shared perspective transcended traditional teachings and allowed them to achieve a power that both balanced and made them strong to their core, but was also unrivaled by those that had a lesser view. Their shared tactical brilliance also set them apart, being wartime Jedi and wartime leaders. Their attachment and love played a central role in their mastery. Both men rejected the idea that attachment led to the dark side, instead discovering that love, when used compassionately, could serve as a pathway to unimaginable power, essentially becoming the ultimate version of the Jedi, especially when they fought to protect the galaxy. Similarly, Luke's love for his friends and his father Anakin not only redeemed Vader, but cemented his role as a beacon of hope and balance. Luke and Revan demonstrated that attachment, when guided by righteous hands, could be a source of strength and was not a source of weakness. This is what made them so unnaturally powerful for their era, beyond their special bloodline. The circumstances of the lives also highlighted a difference between the two of them though. Unlike Luke Skywalker, who operated as the sole steward and Jedi Master of the Order, free from the constraints of any wider institution, Revan was a part of both the Jedi and Sith orders, bound by their structure and expectations. Luke had the freedom to rebuild the Jedi from the ground up. Revan was unable to restructure or reform the Jedi due to his mistrust of the Council and the limitations of his era. This fundamental difference allowed Luke to realize a vision that Revan could only briefly glimpse, establishing a new order rooted in balance and love, an unparalleled, unimaginable power. Power that came to them quite naturally, something that scared Jedi and Sith alike. Revan's brilliance and insight was early for his time, far too early, and the galaxy was not ready to accept his revolutionary ideas. He lived in an era where the Jedi Council clung to outdated dogma, and the Sith relied solely on domination and power. Revan's understanding of the Force could not reshape these old institutions. This left him isolated in his pursuit of balance. But Luke, though, by contrast, was the sole Jedi of his era, free to redefine the Order's principles as its sole master. This independence gave Luke the ability to achieve what Revan could not, a restructured Jedi Order that embraced love, attachment, and balance. In the end, Revan and Luke would have been kindred spirits, sharing a vision of the Force as a unified whole, transcending the limitations of the light and dark, Jedi or Sith. They both valued compassion and had a purity in how they viewed the Force, as a master of balance. Though they were separated by 1,000 years and circumstances, their philosophies were remarkably aligned, and both proved that the Force's true potential lay in embracing all of its aspects and control. Together, their legacies illuminate the path to ultimate harmony, showing that it is through love, understanding, and balance that true power is achieved in the Force. And that is why, back to the archives, students of the Force, we have been waiting for you. Luke loved and cared for Obi-Wan Kenobi greatly, calling him Ben Kenobi for most of his life, grew up knowing the hermit as both a cocky old man in the Judland wastes and as something of a distant grandfather figure. Ben would be the one to introduce Luke to the Force, to set him on the path of becoming a Jedi Knight. And even though their training only lasted a handful of days, Luke Skywalker still revered Obi-Wan as one of his greatest teachers. However, he would go on to consider Yoda to be his actual, official Jedi Master. And according to the old EU novels, he may have believed that Yoda in general was a better Jedi Master than Obi-Wan. While this makes sense in terms of years of experience and the difference between the two of them, there is actually a much deeper reason that Luke preferred Yoda as a teacher instead of Ben Kenobi. So join us today as we open a special holocron and dive into the secret thoughts thoughts of Luke Skywalker once again. We need to make something clear. We aren't calling Obi-Wan a bad Jedi Master, and neither would Luke. Obi-Wan was dealt a very bad hand in the beginning of having the position of a master thrust upon him by the death of his own master in Qui-Gon Jinn. There was still a lot of learning whenever he was teaching Anakin, and even after Obi-Wan attained the rank of a Jedi Master, there was a lot about the Force that he did not know. However, a lot of the problems with his teaching style came in the form of his overly critical mentor style, something that Anakin reacted very poorly with. His whole life, Obi-Wan was a very by-the-books Jedi. He clashed with the freedom-loving Qui-Gon Jinn and the young, rebellious, powerful Anakin. We see in Attack of the Clones how Obi-Wan first resorts to dealing with Anakin's mistakes, to berate and to lecture him. At this point in time, this was when Obi-Wan believed that a master's duty was to teach them through words and explanations, to help make their student as wise as powerful, the way that he had been taught at the Jedi Temple. But this is an imperfect teaching style, especially for Anakin. It would take Obi-Wan years to learn that Anakin learned much better through action, which led Obi-Wan to teaching through example rather than lectures. It would be this eventual change in style that would break their contention, and would forge a brotherly bond that we see them having in the Clone War. True allies in the Force rather than enemies of philosophy. But Obi-Wan still indulged in a good lecture of Anakin more often than not. But despite his efforts at garnering a close relationship with Skywalker, Obi-Wan didn't make himself emotionally available. Growing up in the Jedi Temple away from civilization and all life made the concepts of a family bond foreign to that of Obi-Wan. When Anakin had a problem, his advice was usually be mindful of your feelings, and Obi-Wan said little else. Anakin stopped trusting his master with his personal problems and emotions after that, and soon, Obi-Wan could sense the knots in Anakin's soul forming. He chose to let them go about though, unspoken. He learned before that pressuring Anakin into opening up was not the right thing to do, but because of this, Obi-Wan abandoned trying to reach Anakin on a deeper level altogether. This was made even worse when he suspected that Padme and Anakin were in a relationship, and he chose to protect his friend through silence. The two never spoke of this relationship, though they each had a silent understanding. But the real fracture in their friendship, both of this emotional silence, came from Anakin's slaughter of the Tusken Raiders and his change after this. Obi-Wan constantly wondered and worried about the events surrounding Shmi Skywalker's death, but he never sought to extract the truth from Anakin, who was clearly torn up and broken about it on the inside. Obi-Wan was legitimately afraid of how Anakin would react. This lack of an emotional connection between the two of them left Anakin in need of a father figure, someone who would validate his feelings, driving him right into the arms of Palpatine. And of course, the rest of the dominoes will fall in time. But we've been talking a lot about Anakin. In the EU novel Jedi Search, Luke Skywalker was pulling together several prospective students to form his Jedi Academy. While intimidated at the prospect of teaching others in the ways of the Force, Luke was eager to restart the Jedi. However, one piece of anxiety lingered deep within his mind. Luke was terrified of one of his students falling to the dark side. He didn't let his worry overcome his desire to teach, but it did stick with him every step of the way. The biggest reason for this was Obi-Wan Kenobi, as great of a teacher as Luke saw him as, he recognized that Anakin had become Lord Vader, and that he had done so under the watch of Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. Not only that, but Luke knew from experience that Obi-Wan had a bad habit, a habit of keeping secrets and telling half-truths or even outright lies in order to protect his students, when of course he was wrong. Luke had struggled to forgive Obi-Wan for lying about his father. He didn't see Obi-Wan's certain point of view at all. He didn't believe it was helpful, and resented how Obi-Wan had covered up the truth. Luke was aware of what Obi-Wan said about his own protection, but he also admitted that he never asked for or wanted that protection. It didn't take long for Luke to realize that these sorts of habits were probably what caused his father to fall to the dark side. Mistakes in Obi-Wan's teaching. By contrast, shockingly, Yoda being the harsher teacher, Luke had less problems with. The only issue he took with the Grand Master was his doctrine on attachment, and how he viewed the Jedi Code. Luke interpreted the Jedi Code differently, and believed that love empowered the Jedi when they were not shackled by fear, loss, or jealousy. Luke was not afraid of falling to the dark side over the ones that he loved, and indeed found strength from them. But that was the only point of disagreement that the two Jedi had. Luke found Yoda to be more forthcoming than Obi-Wan, not sheltering of the truth, but encouraging him to seek the truth with caution. Yoda characterizes this when Luke feels the coldness from the dark side cave of Dagobah. Yoda did not shout at him to get away from it. Instead, Yoda encouraged his student to go in and explore the cave, but with the only stipulation that he should leave his weapons behind. Luke ignored this final instruction, but ended up paying the price for it. The vision in the cave was punishment for not heeding Yoda's advice, allowing him to learn Yoda's wisdom by example. And Luke continued to doubt his own abilities on Dagobah. Yoda taught him anything is possible through the Force. The point being, nothing with Yoda was ever hidden from Luke. It was the opposite. Yoda revealed secrets to Luke. In the end, it was more than him just having spent time with Yoda more than he did with Obi-Wan. He felt more of a connection with Yoda as his pure Jedi Master. And while it was completely true that personality-wise, Luke got on far better with Obi-Wan, he did believe Yoda to be the greater instructor. And if Luke Skywalker was going to be the new Grand Master of the Jedi Order, he wanted to learn from the Grand Master. He was taught by Yoda to embrace the clarity of the Force. It goes to show that in exile, Yoda and Obi-Wan learned very different lessons. Obi-Wan thought that he had done more to protect Anakin from the horrors of the galaxy, then things would not have turned out so badly. He even attempted to do this with Luke, saying, "I don't want to lose you to the Emperor the way I lost Vader." Obi-Wan internalized his shame. He tried to make up with it with Luke. But Yoda learned to put away his shame, to move beyond it, as a great teacher. He learned that holding students back only caused them to become frustrated. His advice to Luke was to not underestimate the powers of the Emperor, and to take with him everything that he had learned. In the books though, despite Luke Skywalker's best efforts, his Jedi would fall to the dark side under his watch. But many wouldn't. Many would hold strong to the code. Two of these Jedi though happened within mere months of Luke opening his Jedi Academy on Yavin 4. Though this dark turn was ushered in by the influence of Exar Kun's spirit. We plan on making a full video soon talking about Gantoris, one of Luke Skywalker's greatest failures as a Jedi Master, and how Luke dealt with his own student falling to the dark side. It'll be interesting especially how critical Luke was of Obi-Wan. And so, this was why Luke thought that Yoda was a much better teacher and a much better Jedi Master than Obi-Wan Kenobi was, even though he still loved, admired, and respected Obi-Wan a great deal. So tell us, what do you think about this? We love to see Luke honor both of his teachers, but acknowledge their faults at the same time, to seek to rise above them, as failure, even of others, is the greatest teacher. Luke is humbled that he refuses to think of himself as better than his teachers were in any way, but wise enough to take their teachings and to fix their mistakes. I like getting into Luke's perspective of the old Jedi way. Luke looks at them from a completely fresh and a new perspective. The Jedi of the old era are gone, and it's now his job to reconstruct them, so he takes that job very seriously. But what now, we told you was true from a certain point of view. Those words would haunt Luke Skywalker's mind for years after Obi-Wan had spoke them, and despite all the reasons Luke loved and cherished the memory of his old master, that one line would muddy Luke's feelings about Obi-Wan for a very long time. Greetings again, students of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. We're glad you've returned. What Ben Kenobi told Luke about Vader killing his father was always meant to protect the young Luke's mind. He was not mature enough as a man to accept that as a Jedi, the truth of his parentage. Nevertheless, Obi-Wan told him a blatant lie, and ended up causing Luke far more grief in the long run. Even after Luke had managed to bring his father back from the dark side, Luke could not let go of the resentment that he had for Obi-Wan. Even 7 years later, when he began teaching his own students, Luke would struggle to overcome his buried unforgiveness towards his old master, and that almost cost him dearly. So join us as we open another holocron and explore Luke's difficult time forgiving Obi-Wan for lying about Anakin. Before we get into the actual meat of his feelings though, we wanted to cover exactly why it impacted Luke so greatly. By the time he was a Jedi Knight, he was mature enough to realize when people were just trying to protect him. After all, he understood why Yoda didn't want him to go rescue his friends. But Obi-Wan's one fib held Luke back emotionally, even when he was a Jedi Master. This all goes back to how Luke grew up. On Tatooine, he only ever knew his aunt and uncle. Owen and Beru Lars loved Luke as their own, a family where he learned the most important life lessons. Even if Owen was strict with him, but Luke knew that he wasn't their son after all. He was never called Luke Lars. He desperately wanted to know who his real father was, and it was clear that Owen, out of his shame, had lied to Luke and told him that Anakin was a merchant on a spice freighter. Owen had avoided the topic of Anakin, Obi-Wan, or even the problems in the wider galaxy. Owen tried desperately not to give in to Luke's questions, as the boy's curiosity in his mind would lead him to become like his father. But Luke had too much of Anakin in him, and so his curiosity and a sense of adventure was never satiated. When Luke heard the truth about Anakin being a Jedi, the best star pilot in the galaxy, and a cunning warrior, it fulfilled more than even his wildest fantasies about how great his father really was. It was because of this that Luke then went on to follow in his footsteps and wanted to become a Jedi, and that is exactly what he would say to Yoda. But then the bombshell dropped. the man he had wanted to know his entire life, the man he looked up to and fantasized about since he was a boy, had been betrayed and murdered by Lord Vader, the Dark Lord of the Empire that currently ruled as a tyrant. Luke's friend, Biggs Darklighter, had run off to join the rebellion to fight Vader and his dreadful empire, leaving Luke on Tatooine. At the time, Obi-Wan didn't consider how much Luke looked up to the memory of Anakin, no matter how doctored it was, and therefore, he didn't think about the consequences of lying to Luke. It was this single falsehood that drove Luke to the dark side on Cloud City. Having been completely overmatched and beaten to a pulp, Luke stared into the skull-like mask which reflected nothing but hatred and death. Vader was the monster who killed countless rebels, allowed the destruction of worlds, and who tortured his friends. But then it was revealed that the father, the one that he had loved in retrospect for so long, was Vader beneath that mask. Luke's entire world crashed down around him, echoing a greater force than the Death Star's explosion. The trauma of losing his hand was nothing in the face of the realization that everything that he knew, the greatest man in the galaxy, had all been a lie. More than that, a mockery. There was no more denying it. The Force confirmed to Luke when he searched his feelings. Years later, when Master Luke Skywalker returned to Bespin to pick up one of his prospective students, he almost went into a panic upon seeing the abandoned city. The city still in the clouds. He was stricken with horrible memories of Han and Carbonite, losing his hand, and learning the awful truth which haunted him to that day. But because of his Jedi discipline, he calmed himself, focused on the mission. But he tried to get away from Bespin as soon as he could after. The first thing Luke had asked was, "Ben, why didn't you tell me?" For the next year after Bespin, Luke would receive no answer from Obi-Wan, although he searched the journals of the old Jedi Master. The journal had been written for Luke to read, so Obi-Wan wrote it in such a way to perpetuate that story. He wrote Anakin and Vader as separate entities. He avoided mentioning Anakin's fall. Luke would only get to confront old Ben Kenobi on Dagobah after becoming a Jedi Knight. But instead of giving a satisfying answer, or even have Obi-Wan apologize, Obi-Wan doubled down. He dodged Luke's feelings and gave him the excuse, "What I told you was true from a certain point of view." This made Kenobi the target of Luke's resentment. He had been completely caught off guard by the world-shattering revelation of Vader's true identity. He didn't feel that way towards Yoda. Yoda had explained himself. And when Yoda confirmed that Vader had told him was true and that Vader was his father, Yoda only said it was unexpected and unfortunate. Angry, Luke snapped back. "Unfortunate that I know the truth?" However, Yoda denied this, stating that it was actually unfortunate that his training was incomplete and that Luke was not prepared for the burden of the truth. This statement alone means that Yoda was eventually going to be the one to tell Luke what he was not ready to hear, and Yoda would tell him when he was. Had he stayed on Dagobah, he would have had the truth revealed to him, and Luke accepted this. He saw Yoda as someone who was trying to help him, rather than how he viewed Obi-Wan now, someone who wanted to bury the shame of the truth, to bury the shame of their own failings. 7 years after the Battle of Endor, Luke had a nightmare in his Jedi Academy. At this point in his life, the spirit of Exar Kun had begun his reign of terror and entered into the very dream of Grandmaster Luke, attempting to sway him with knowledge of the dark side. In the dream, Exar appeared to Luke in the form of Anakin. We then get the conversation that reveals Luke's hidden unforgiveness towards Obi-Wan. "Do not be deceived, Luke. Do not trust everything you think is truth." Anakin's word carried an odd, distant tilt, like the faint accent of an ancient race. "Obi-Wan lied to you more than once." Luke felt uneasiness well up within him. No matter how much he loved Obi-Wan Kenobi, he knew the old man had not always been completely forthcoming with him. Luke then said, "Yes, I know he hid the truth from me. He told me Darth Vader had killed you, when you really became Vader." Anakin met Luke's gaze with eyes as bottomless as the universe itself. "Was that the only lie that Obi-Wan told you?" Luke responds, "No, he hid other things from me as well." Anakin says, "And Obi-Wan rationalized it as being for your own protection. Did you ask for such protection, Luke?" "No." Luke tried to fight back his uneasiness. "Obi-Wan wanted you to be a student, but he wouldn't allow you the freedom to make your own decision. Did he trust you so little? Do you always agree with his certain point of view?" "No," Luke said, feeling the words swallowed up in doubt. All of Exar's questions as Anakin were meant to lead Luke into more doubt and to stoke his resentment in his Jedi Master. But even though Luke was being purposefully goaded, he couldn't be tempted with anger by the Sith if it didn't exist. Those feelings were buried within the Grand Master deep, and Luke was uncomfortable talking about them, but they were real. and to that very day he still had felt betrayed by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now if you're curious about how the situation ends, Exar Kun ends up revealing too much of his hand, and Luke quickly discovers the man that he's talking to is not his father, as he begins to say things that Anakin never would. Luke calls out the deception and attempts to figure out the identity of this imposter, but Exar Kun simply turns the dream to darkness, while cackling until Luke wakes up in a cold sweat. Luke would not carry these feelings of resentment with him forever towards Kenobi though. That is not the way of the Jedi. Luke Skywalker would come to forgive Obi-Wan, but he also took with him a valuable lesson. He ensured that most of his students would be told the truth about the Force, the truth about the Jedi. Luke Skywalker loved Ben, but he knew the man was flawed, and Luke made every effort to not repeat those same mistakes. As Luke attempted to learn from not only the mistakes of Yoda as the Grand Master, but also from his first Jedi Master and teacher in Obi-Wan Kenobi. But that's why a fascinating question to pose to you today. Can you make a lightsaber out of anything? Welcome back, students of the Force, and to the archives, we've been expecting you. For thousands upon thousands of years, the lightsaber has been recognized as a noble weapon, one which requires intentions with both its construct and its use. Both the Jedi and Sith treat the construction of this weapon as an important step in their journey, and these Padawans, or acolytes, must find a very specific list of material in which to construct their lightsaber. But there have been cases in the lore where a Jedi have chosen to personalize their weapon beyond the norm. Other times they were forced to improvise a lightsaber or a kyber crystal in some sort of a survival situation. But our researchers have come across lightsabers today made of increasingly questionable material and of stranger, more complex design. So we pose the question, can a lightsaber really be made of just about anything? So today, we put together a small list of some of the strangest lightsabers made of some of the strangest material that we could find in the Star Wars lore. So by the way, if you happen to know an oddly crafted lightsaber that we do not mention here, please comment it down below. We at the archives too always love learning more about the lore. We felt it necessary to start our list with a more familiar lightsaber, the lightsaber wielded by the Jedi Padawan Gungi. While Force sensitivity is rare among the people, the Wookiees are innately connected to the trees of Kashyyyk on a spiritual level. They consider the Worshir trees to be sacred, since they have a sort of sentience of their own. From a young age, the Wookiees are taught how to commune with the trees, to gain wisdom by listening. To this end, Gungi crafted his lightsaber from the hilt of the wood of a brylark tree. As a Wookiee, Gungi believed that this lightsaber would give him a clear connection to the living force. His hand would almost always be connected with the wood no matter where he went. This was especially helpful since he lived on the world of Coruscant. Master Hu Yang mentions that the only wood of the brylark tree was as strong as metal, which was how Gungi was able to create a lightsaber that wouldn't just go up in flames when activated. And appropriately for the young Jedi, it emitted a green blade, signifying Gungi's trust and reliance on the Force. With that said, it's time for things to get weird. From this point forward in the video will be entirely Star Wars Legends, and all of the lightsabers were constructed by students of Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy. The days of the kyber crystals and proper lightsaber material were exceedingly rare in Luke's Jedi Order. This forced Luke to be very creative in how he constructed his lightsabers, and how he went about teaching his students how to construct their own. Not only this, the Jedi were also a lot more individualistic of this era due to Luke. In the realm of lightsaber crafting of organic material, Gungi was not alone, and a Jedi of Luke's order by the name of Ten Nel Kajo decided to craft her lightsaber out of a Rancor's tooth. Her great-grandmother, Ogwen, was famous for taming the Rancors, and actually kept a lot of them as pets, and apparently the grandmother had one of her favorites. This Rancor produced smaller teeth which were passed down through the generations of the family as heirlooms, and so Luke Skywalker's student decided to use this Rancor teeth as an item in which to craft her lightsaber. She carved intricate battle etchings into the hilt, then applied a black paste made of dampening volcanic sand, and polished the tooth until it brought back the carvings into sharp relief. Unfortunately though, she had used a faulty crystal from a nearby volcano, and not to mention the tooth cavity was much too small for the electronics of the weapon, causing them to be crowded within the tooth. Because of the poor crystal and the unideal arrangement, the resulting blade was a dull gray and very unstable in nature. However, the Jedi addressed this problem, as she believed that it could be amended, and that her skills as a warrior would be proven. And although Luke Skywalker disagreed, he allowed his student to take her chosen path. The Jedi would soon learn, however, that tuning a lightsaber was paramount to wielding it safely, and during one of her sparring sessions with Jacen Solo, her lightsaber's power source overloaded in the middle of a blade lock, causing the blade to short out entirely. Because Jacen had been actively pushing against her lightsaber, he accidentally severed her left arm when the blade vanished. The Rancor-toothed lightsaber then exploded on the ground. Jo was filled with such shame that she decided to depart from the Jedi Order after this, realizing she had not listened to the teachings of the Jedi Master and had now suffered the consequences, bringing great shame to not only herself, but Luke. However, Jo would again one day return and continue her Jedi training. She never gave up on her original design of a lightsaber either, and traveled to Dathomir to recover a new Rancor tooth. Now having a new mechanical arm, she selected her crystal far more carefully, selecting a Galeronian rainbow gem picked out of the crown remains from her royal heritage. This time, the crystal was stable, and the blade produced was turquoise in coloration. Her choice of an heirloom gem from a tiara, however, was not the first time that Luke Skywalker students had to substitute kyber crystals. Those kinds of crystals were in dramatically short supply in the days after the Empire, so oftentimes, the apprentices of the new Jedi Order would find fill-ins for the traditional crystal. Here is a recorded holocron segment of Luke Skywalker talking about this very thing. One of the other crucial pieces is a focusing crystal. The most powerful and sought after gems are rare kyber crystals. However, though lightsabers are powerful weapons, their design is so flexible that practically any kind of crystal can be used. And since I don't happen to have a stash of kyber crystals, you'll have to make do with something else of your own choosing. One of my students, Sil Gal, a Mon Calamari like Admiral Akbar, made her lightsaber with smooth curves and protrusions, as if the handle had been grown from metallic coral. She used a rare Ultima Pearl, one of the treasures found in the seabeds of her watery planet. Directly from the mouth of Grandmaster Luke Skywalker, it is said that any kind of crystal or gem can be used in a lightsaber, though doing so may result in strange effects depending on the crystal used. However, the Jedi that he mentions here decided to use a pearl from her homeworld. It is said that properly instilling a Ultima Pearl requires considerable skill. The last person known to have potentially used such a treasure in their hilt was actually Revan, who at one point used a Krayt Dragon Pearl in his lightsaber for a short period of time. By the way, we may say he might have, because using a Krayt Dragon Pearl in your lightsaber is a player choice in the game. There isn't anything in Legends to suggest that Revan definitely did use it, but it is one of the options that is presented. At any rate, the use of a pearl in the game in place of a crystal is actually one of the strangest ones you could choose, although it's one that I am a big fan of. Using odd replacements for crystals is necessary when your back is against the wall. During the Yuzhong Vong War, Anakin Solo was searching for another student by the name of Vela, tracking her down to Yavin 4, which was currently occupied by the Vong. His lightsaber's focusing crystal was damaged at the time, so the young Anakin disguised himself as a slave to infiltrate the compound. His mission became clear as he was assigned to harvest Vong lambents, who were living crystals that provided illumination when stimulated by telepathic energy. It required 2 full days of meditation, but Anakin Solo attuned himself to the crystal of the Vong and used it to repair his lightsaber. Following this though, Anakin learned that his attunement to the crystal enabled him to have a vague awareness of nearby Yuzhong Vong, who had previously been undetectable in the Force. While a Vong lightsaber crystal is compelling, there is only one person who wears the crown of an improvised lightsaber, and that is Corran Horn. Corran Horn literally had a rigged together lightsaber made of literal trash. The lightsaber of Corran Horn is one of the biggest reasons we wanted to make this video. Corran had infiltrated a pirate gang and had nothing to defend himself except for the scrap in a junkyard that he had on hand, and his only instructions were those recorded by his grandfather. For his crystals, he had 3 options: an emerald, a Durinfire jewel, and a diamond. All of them were meant to decorate an old bottle of Savarine brandy. For the electronics, he used a Dynoric laser feed line from a broken blaster cannon, and a throttle assembly and a handlebar lube for a junker speeder bike. And of course, to power the thing, it only required a basic power cell, which was very easy to find. At this point, Corran Horn hadn't been a Jedi for very long at all, but this process of rigging together a lightsaber out of the Star Wars equivalent of spit and duct tape helped push him through his internal struggles, and Corran would indeed become a powerful Jedi. But from the tooth of a Rancor to the dumpster saber, these were some of the strangest lightsabers, made from some of the strangest materials in all of Star Wars lore. In the darkest chapters of the galaxy's history, when the boundaries between light and dark are blurred, a shadow emerged, a figure both feared and prophesized. known only as the Dark Man, he haunted the dreams of not only Grandmaster Luke Skywalker, but Jacen Solo alike, a silent specter of inevitable conflict. This Dark Man, secretly the Sith Lord Darth Krayt, was proof to Luke Skywalker that the Sith still lingered. Their presence was a looming threat even in the fragile peace of a new republic. Darth Krayt had walked in the shadows for years, his journey one of pain and transformation. From the Padawan Asherad Het who carried the burden of his father's death, to a wandering bounty hunter, and finally, a Dark Lord. On Korriban, he discovered the ancient holocron of Zozan, the Sith Lady, unlocking the secrets of the ancient Sith and forging himself anew. Yet, his rise was marked not by a thirst for immediate revenge, but by a long, patient evolution, as he sought purpose beyond the revenge that he could no longer claim after the death of Palpatine and Vader. "I left for the unknown regions, determined to lose myself," Krayt once said. But I learned that unknown does not mean empty. It was when Abeloth, the ancient chaotic force of nature that sought to dominate all life, rose to threaten the galaxy. The Jedi and Sith faced a rare moment of reckoning. For the first time, their eternal war had to be set aside. Darth Krayt, a master of the dark side and one of the few beings capable of standing against Abeloth, emerged from the shadows with a chilling proclamation. There is only one way to stop Abeloth: Jedi and Sith together. Luke Skywalker felt the pull of Darth Krayt's power as the Sith Lord strode into battle. Luke sensed him immediately, a towering figure shrouded by shadow, shrouded by power, ambition, death. His glowing eyes shifted unpredictably, making the Grand Master extremely uneasy, reflecting the chaos within the man. His arrival marked a rare union of light and dark, an alliance forged not through trust, but from the desperate need to confront a threat that transcended the Force itself. In the climactic duel, Darth Krayt demonstrated his terrifying mastery of the Force, piercing Abeloth with his unrelenting precision, his tattooed hand striking with deadly purpose. As he drained her essence, his screams of agony echoed through the Lake of Apparitions, mingling with Abeloth's shrieks of defeat and terror. Even in a moment of triumph, however brief, Krayt's nature betrayed him. The moment that Abeloth seemingly fell, he turned on Luke Skywalker, his dark hunger for power driving him to drain the Jedi Grand Master's strength. To Luke, this was the Sith made manifest. Krayt, this Dark Man, was a being capable of immense sacrifice, an unparalleled betrayal. Yet, in that moment, Krayt embodied a truth that would haunt Luke for years to come. The Sith, though defeated for now, could never truly be vanquished. They were a constant reminder of the galaxy's fragility, their presence proof that darkness could always rise. For a brief amount of time, Jedi and Sith stood side by side against a threat that neither could comprehend nor defeat alone. But this unity was a fleeting one, a fragile alliance born of necessity, not trust. Abeloth was defeated, but Krayt left his own mark upon the galaxy, a reminder that even in victory, the Sith bring their own evil. The Dark Man's shadow stretched far into the future, a lingering presence in Luke's mind. He was a harbinger of what was to come, a symbol of an eternal cycle of light and dark. And though Abeloth had been cast into the void, Krayt's shadow remained a specter of power in the galaxy, vengeance, and the inevitable resurgence of the Sith. In a galaxy defined by the eternal struggle of light and dark, Luke Skywalker has always viewed the Sith as destroyers, harbingers of chaos that would sooner burn the galaxy to ash than share it with the Jedi. But Krayt was different. For all his darkness, for all the hatred and ambition that burned within him, Krayt represented something that Luke had never seen in a Sith. A willingness to act for the sake of self-preservation for a wider cause. Luke grew to appreciate the Dark Lord in a strange, reluctant way. He could not ignore Krayt's refusal to let the galaxy fall to Abeloth, a being so terrible that even the Sith could not sit idle. Krayt's pragmatism was undeniable. Without life, Darth Krayt would have nothing to rule. Darth Krayt had decided to protect what would be his, even if it meant joining forces with the Jedi. In this way, he's quite similar to Palpatine. He does not wish to rule over a galaxy of the dead. For this, Luke Skywalker was grateful, though not without wariness. The Sith that he had known before Palpatine, Vader, and others had sought only to dominate through destruction, tearing down the galaxy to rebuild it in their image. But Krayt had arrived without a call, unbidden, unasked for, a harbinger of chaos who for a fleeting moment represented hope. In that rare moment, Luke Skywalker found himself respecting the Dark Lord's resolve, his willingness to stand against a threat that would obliterate them all. It was a grim reminder that even in the darkest of souls, they had their place in the galaxy's balance. And in that moment, Crait's shadow was not one of terror, but necessity. A Sith who had chosen to fight for survival, not for altruism, but out of the cold logic that life must endure for power to have any meaning. And though their paths would inevitably diverge, Luke would not deny the strange sense of gratitude that he felt. For once, the Sith had not been destroyers, they were allies, and for a brief fragile moment, the light and the dark stood together against something that sought to unmake them both. But not all Jedi shared Luke's opinion, or his stance. To Jacen Solo, the Dark Man was not a savior or an ally, he was a dark omen that haunted his dreams. From the very first moment that he glimpsed the shadowy figure in his visions, Jacen saw Crait as something more dangerous than any Sith who had come before. Crait was not just a Sith, he was a reckoning, a being who embodied both destruction and full mastery, who wielded not only the power of the dark side, but the knowledge of the Jedi as well. And while the Grand Master could reluctantly appreciate Crait's willingness to act against Abeloth, Jacen could see the greater threat that the Dark Man represented. Luke, perhaps blinded by necessity, saw Crait as a temporary ally in a fight against an unthinkable foe. But Jacen Solo knew what Crait truly was. Darth Crait was evil, and he was powerful. A Sith forged not only by hatred, but by study and understanding. He had delved into the deepest, most forbidden knowledge of the Force, drawing from the teachings of the original 12 exiled, the founders of the Sith Order itself. To Jacen Solo, Darth Crait was an imminent warning, a vision of what the galaxy could become if such a being were to rise unchecked. And it was that inescapable certainty of ruin that drove Jacen Solo down his own dark path. He believed the Jedi as they were too weak to stop the Sith that was coming. He believed that he had to become something stronger, something darker to ensure the galaxy's survival. The image of the Dark Man looming in his mind was the catalyst that led Jacen to take the name Darth Caedus. For all his power, Crait was more than just a Sith Lord. He was an architect of despair, a being who could weave together Jedi and Sith lore into something new, something unstoppable. Where the Sith of old burned the galaxy for power, Crait sought to dominate it entirely, not through chaos, but through calculated, enduring rule. He was the living embodiment of the Sith's ancient promise of inevitability. That was that the dark side would always rise, more cunning, more powerful, more prepared. And as Jacen Solo fell to the dark side, the shadow of Crait loomed over him, an ever-present reminder of what he feared and what he sought to become. For although Luke Skywalker had appreciated the Dark Man's actions against Abeloth in a fleeting moment, Jacen Solo saw the truth. Darth Crait was no savior. He was the storm on the horizon, a reckoning that neither the Sith nor the Jedi could ignore. To Jacen, the galaxy stood at a precarious crossroads, and the visions of the future that plagued him left little room for doubt. Among the many threats that he saw, one stood above the others: this Dark Man. This dark figure was not merely a Sith, he was the Reckoning, a force of darkness unlike anything Jacen had ever seen. And in his dreams, Jacen watched as the Jedi Order shattered and countless lives extinguished. Jacen believed that the Jedi were bound to tradition and restrained by their own moral codes. They were incapable of stopping, killing Crait. To him, the Jedi lacked the ruthless necessity to confront the kind of evil that Darth Crait represented. He believed he was the embodiment of everything that could destroy, a master of the Jedi and Sith, armed with the wisdom of the ancient Sith Lords and unshackled by limitations of any order. Jacen Solo looked at Darth Crait as an unchecked evil, and himself as a mastered evil. Jacen rationalized his descent into darkness as a necessary sacrifice. The Force had shown him that Crait would not be stopped by conventional means, nor could the Jedi survive the coming storm without radical change. To Jacen, the galaxy needed a leader who could wield the dark side with precision and control, someone to embrace power without succumbing to it. Jacen believed that he could be that figure, a Sith who would wield the darkness to destroy darkness, just like his grandfather thought. To Jacen, his turn to the dark side as Caedus was not a betrayal of the Jedi, but an evolution beyond them. He saw himself as the only one willing to do what needed to be done to make the hard choices that others could not. He viewed the dark side as a tool, a weapon to shape the galaxy's destiny and avert the horrors of his vision. In Crate's mind, if Crate represented inevitability of the Sith's resurgence, then Jacen's transformation into Qui-Gon was the only way to stop this. To counter, to defeat Crate, Jacen believed that he needed to become more than a Jedi, more than a Sith, something new, capable of standing against the storm. Crate knew the Jedi, Jacen knew this, but Jacen did not know the Sith. Jacen's choice came at a great cost. The darkness that he embraced to stop Crate consumed him, alienating him from his family, his comrades, and the very ideals that he sought to uphold. His belief in his own righteousness blinded him to the reality that his actions were paving way for the very future that he was trying to prevent. It would be Jacen that would weaken the galaxy for Crate to later claim. In his desperation to save the galaxy itself from Crate, Qui-Gon became the harbinger of chaos, his fall a tragic reflection, dangers of seeking out destiny as a justification for any means. And yet, even as Qui-Gon, Jacen never let go of his conviction that he had done what was necessary. He was to be the sacrifice, his very soul, because Jacen knew if the galaxy fell to Crate, there would be no galaxy left to save after. Crate was dangerous because he combined the cunning of the Sith with the knowledge of the Jedi. He had mastered elements of their lore and an unparalleled force for domination. He wielded lost teachings, those of the original Dark Jedi exiles, making him a threat not only to his enemies, but to the balance of the Force itself. His vision of the galaxy was neither chaos nor destruction, but totalitarian control, relentless, calculated, a rule that would endure for generations. Luke Skywalker saw Crate as a chilling reminder that the Sith were not merely destructive, but also calculated, enduring conquests. While he appreciated Crate's willingness to act against Abeloth, Luke feared that the Dark Lord's true ambitions and devastation would rise to an inevitable dark future. And that, my friends, we already know that Abeloth is far more powerful than Luke Skywalker is. This is not up for debate. She is a godlike entity with abilities that completely eclipse what any mortal Jedi or Sith could ever achieve. But today, I'm not here to decide if Luke could defeat her in one-on-one combat. Instead, I want to pit them against one another in a versus setting in order to quantify their power difference. Luke Skywalker's strength is something Star Wars fans are much more familiar with. His lightsaber skills, his mastery of the Force, and his ability to stand against some of the galaxy's greatest threats. Many understand Luke Skywalker's limits, which makes him the perfect baseline for comparison. By dissecting their abilities, attributes, and feats side by side, we can better illustrate exactly how much more powerful Abeloth really is. So the next time someone asks you how Abeloth compares to Luke, this is the video that you can point them to. And you, dear student of the Force, will know exactly how powerful Abeloth was. Luke Skywalker, the son of Anakin, inherited his father's immense potential in the Force. George Lucas has indicated that Luke's potential was on par with Anakin's and what it could have been had he not been diminished by his injuries and turned to the dark side. In this light, Luke embodies the realization of the Chosen One's full capabilities, achieving a mastery of the Force unparalleled by any Jedi or Sith in history before or after. Feats like confronting Lord Vader, establishing a new Jedi Order, and facing formidable adversaries like the resurrected Palpatine underscored Luke Skywalker's exceptional power. Understand this: Luke Skywalker is the most powerful Jedi or Sith in Star Wars lore, and he played a pivotal role in restoring balance to the Force as Grand Master. Luke Skywalker achieved a state of near total oneness with the Force before, transcending the boundaries of light and dark to gain an unparalleled understanding of the Force's true nature. Unlike many Jedi before him, Luke acknowledged the existence of the dark side without succumbing to it, using his mastery of the Force to maintain balance and guide his actions with wisdom. His skill with the lightsaber has been likened to dueling 12 of the greatest Jedi Masters simultaneously, showcasing reflexes, precision, and combat acumen that place him in a league entirely his own. The only person that can really compete with Luke Skywalker in terms of the lightsaber is tmarvelouswave, a Sith figure of legend. Beyond physical combat, Luke's command of the Force reaches cosmic scales. He has manipulated black holes, redirecting their gravitational pull to protect allies or alter the course of an entire battle. His ability to tap into such overwhelming strength allows him to be one of the most formidable beings in the entire galaxy. Luke's strength is so vast that it is often described as incomprehensible, a testament to his role as the ultimate realization of what the Force can achieve through balance, knowledge, and sheer will. Quantifying Saying how much more powerful Abeloth is than Luke Skywalker, however, on its own, is entirely subjective, as Star Wars doesn't provide us with metrics for their force powers. However, based on descriptions, feats, and comparisons, we can approximate a range in which we hope to illustrate just how much more powerful Abeloth was compared to Luke. But we will break it down in categories as well. Abeloth's raw power can be considered 10 to 20 times greater than Luke Skywalker's peak as Grand Master, and here's why. Let's begin with comparative feats. Abeloth's feats. Mind domination. She's controlled the minds of thousands of beings, including powerful force wielders like Jedi Masters and Sith Lords alike, all simultaneously. Reality manipulation. Abeloth altered her environment and dimensions, such as twisting physical reality and creating illusions so powerful that they were nearly tangible. Immortality. She exists across dimensions and regenerates from destruction itself, making her virtually unstoppable without external intervention. Godlike avatar forms. She fought against multiple powerful opponents, including Grandmaster Luke and other Sith Lords like Darth Krayt simultaneously while overpowering them. Luke's feats. Combat mastery. Luke at his peak is arguably the strongest mortal Jedi in Star Wars, defeating legendary opponents like Vader and Darth Sidious. Understanding of the Force. Luke can move massive objects, resist Force domination, and enhance his abilities, but Luke Skywalker is challenged by what we will call mortal thresholds. Luke fought Abeloth multiple times and was able to survive through sheer strategy, endurance, and teamwork, but he never truly ever overpowered her, not once. Abeloth's mind domination versus Luke's force resistance. Abeloth has dominated the minds of entire Jedi councils, something that Luke cannot counter without significant struggle. She has overwhelmed him mentally before during their battles. It is estimated that the ratio of Abeloth is 10 times power difference in the mind-based abilities. Abeloth is simply too strong for Luke. Abeloth's immortality versus Luke's mortality. Abeloth's essence spans multiple dimensions and cannot be killed by conventional means. Luke, though exceptionally powerful in his own right, remains bound by the limits of his physical form. The estimated ratio here is that Abeloth is 15 to 20 times his durability and longevity. But what about raw force power? That's why we're all here. While Luke can move mountains, Abeloth can alter reality on a galactic scale. Her feats of environmental domination far exceed anything that Luke has ever demonstrated, and the estimated ratio here is that Abeloth is 15 times more powerful than Luke in raw force manipulation. Overall, I think it could be said that in terms of power, she is 10 to 20 times more powerful than Grandmaster Luke Skywalker in terms of raw force strength, scope of abilities, and resilience. While Luke remains the pinnacle of mortal force mastery, Abeloth's godlike nature places her in a league far beyond any single Jedi or Sith. This disparity is so vast that defeating Abeloth requires more than raw power. It necessitates strategy, collaboration, and exploiting her unique vulnerabilities. But let's go even deeper than this. What about their skills in combat, their understanding of the Force, and their strategic mindsets? Things that operate outside of sheer power alone, where Luke can hope to get an edge. Let's begin with combat skill and techniques. Luke Skywalker is one of the greatest lightsaber duelists of all time, if not the greatest, with mastery of all 7 lightsaber forms as well as creation of his own unique styles. His technique is precise, balanced, and adaptive, allowing him to fight Sith, entire armies, and even contend with Abeloth. He relies on his agility, reflexes, and the understanding of lightsaber combat with the Force to overcome stronger enemies. When we look at Abeloth, something is revealed. She is more powerful than skilled. She overwhelms her enemies with sheer force and unpredictability rather than refined combat and better technique. While she can wield weapons such as her tentacle-like appendages and overpower multiple enemies, her style is chaotic and lacks the discipline of a trained Jedi or a trained Sith. For comparison, in terms of skill rating, we're going to give Luke a 10 out of 10, Abeloth a 6 out of 10. Power and combat, Luke relies on technique and efficiency. Abeloth relies on overwhelming power. But now, strategic mindset. Luke is a seasoned tactician, capable of outmaneuvering Sith, warlords, and entire Imperial admirals. His ability to adapt mid-battle and recognize an opponent's weakness, both physical, emotional, and through the Force, gives Luke a significant edge in leadership in one-on-one battle. Luke uses his deep understanding of his opponent's psychology to win, as seen in his multiple confrontations with Vader and Sidious. Abeloth's strategy revolves around chaos and domination. Her ability to manipulate others is unmatched, and she can psychologically destabilize basically whoever she wants. But her tactics are actually limited by her arrogance, her singular focus on want for destruction. She lacks the nuance and patience of someone that is trained like Luke Skywalker. Tactical rating. We're going to give Luke a 9 out of 10, and Abeloth a 7 out of 10. Luke has the advantage in focused long-term strategy, while Abeloth excels in overwhelming groups with terror and manipulation. Now, resources. Luke Skywalker, as Grand Master of the Jedi Order, has access to temples, archives, and a network of allies across the galaxy. And even beyond, he commands the loyalty of the New Republic and wields the full support of his students, including extremely powerful Force wielders like Jaina Solo, Ben Skywalker. But Luke is mortal, and so are his resources. They are finite and prone to corruption or destruction. Abeloth has near limitless resources due to her ability to manipulate and dominate the minds of others. She can corrupt and control Jedi, Sith, and even entire planetary populations. Her existence spans dimensions, giving her an endless reservoir of avatars. Her resources are metaphysical and virtually inexhaustible, but often chaotic and uncontrollable. For resource rating, Luke gets an 8 out of 10. Mortal, but highly organized and reliable resources. Abeloth gets a 10 out of 10. Limitless though chaotic, and often volatile. But now, what of their understanding of the Force? The most important of all categories. Luke's understanding of the Force is unparalleled among all mortals. He has mastered the light side and learned from ancient Jedi texts. Luke Skywalker has become the embodiment of the Jedi philosophy. He also has a significant understanding of the dark side as well, encountering Sith Lords and artifacts, though he is resistant to all of them. His knowledge is practical and balanced, focused on maintaining the balance of the Force and its will. But Abeloth's understanding of the Force far surpasses Luke due to her ancient origins and transformation through the font of power and the pool of knowledge. She understands the Force in ways mortals cannot comprehend, wielding its raw chaos in manipulating reality, dimensions, and the minds of others. Her understanding is heavily tilted, however, towards the dark side, limiting her ability to grasp balance and harmony. For Force knowledge rating, Luke is going to get a 9 out of 10. Extremely deep, but limited only by his mortal perspective. Abeloth we're going to give an 11 out of 10. A godlike understanding, though chaotic and imbalanced. She, of course, is the embodiment of imbalance. Abeloth's godlike power and metaphysical nature make her far stronger in raw abilities, resources, and Force knowledge. However, Luke's superior combat skill, strategic thinking, and grounded understanding of the Force allows him to hold his own. Ultimately, Abeloth's overwhelming strength requires teamwork and strategy to counter, showcasing the disparity between her divine power and Luke's mortal mastery. Luke's battle with Abeloth exemplifies his mastery of strategy and the power of collaboration in the face of overwhelming odds. Despite Abeloth's immense strength, her near limitless ability to manipulate the Force, Luke leverages his tactical genius, honed through decades of experience, hoping to target her vulnerabilities. Recognizing that raw power alone cannot triumph, he unites with other Jedi, and even Sith, forming a collective front against imbalance. They all play a critical role, providing Luke with the opportunity to engage Abeloth on multiple levels, physically, mentally, and with the Force. By anticipating her moves, dividing her attention, and focusing on coordinated attacks, Luke demonstrates that victory against a superior foe is possible through unity, wisdom, and perseverance. But make no mistake, the tragedy of Abeloth begins with a woman who sought power out of love, driven by her fear of losing those that she cared the most for. As the mortal caretaker of the ones of Mortis, she watched over the cosmic embodiments of the light, dark, and balance, and yet she herself was bound by the frailties of mortality. Her desire to protect and remain with her children forever grew into a consuming fear of abandonment. In desperation, she sought immortality, turning to forbidden Force nexuses that she could not comprehend. Her merging with the pool of knowledge and the font of power was a reckless attempt to unite light and dark. Within her very body, this shattered her humanity, tore her apart from within. What emerged was not the caretaker that she had once been, a loving mother and wife, but something unnatural, an imperfect, and a heretical fusion of opposing forces that created a being twisted, vile, and cruel beyond measure. The violent, forceful merging of light and dark, instead of granting her balance or enlightenment, broke her mind and body, twisting her, transforming her into a monstrous force of chaos. The love and the fear that once defined her became perverted, manifesting as a destructive hunger for control and a desperate need to dominate. The woman that she had been was now lost, torn asunder by the warring energies of light and dark that could never coexist in harmony. Her act of defiance against the natural order of the Force created not an immortal protector, but an eternal abomination, an embodiment of imbalance. Abeloth became a creature of profound cruelty, driven mad by the forces within her, a reminder of the terrible consequences of seeking power without understanding, and the dangers of defying the very nature of the Force. In this new twisted form, Abeloth reached out to the ones of Mortis, her family, not with love as she once had, but with a desperate need to dominate and control. Her fractured mind, consumed by the clashing energies of light and dark, saw them no longer as family, beings to protect, but as tools to secure her power, to stave off the loneliness that now haunted her every moment. Her corruptedness sought to bend the daughter's light and the son's darkness, and even the father's balance to her own chaotic purpose. For the first time, the father, a being of unparalleled strength and wisdom, felt true fear. He realized that Abeloth was no longer the caretaker that he had once trusted, but a force of raw, destructive energy and madness, beyond even the combined might of his near godlike family. Out of love and desperation to save his children, the father used the extent of his power to shield the ones and to flee from Abeloth's insatiable hunger. Her existence was an affront to the very nature of the galaxy, an imbalance that the father feared would unravel the universe. Though the ones were powerful, their strength paled against the abomination that Abeloth had become. The father's retreat was not of cowardice, but a calculated act of survival, a recognition that confronting Abeloth would mean annihilation, not just for his family, but potentially of all creation. In exile on Mortis, the father locked himself away, keeping his children close, away from the galaxy, knowing that Abeloth's corruption were ever to spread, that it would be calamity of which the galaxy would never recover. Abeloth's true terror lies not in her raw power, but in the fact that her very existence is an aberration, a being who was never meant to be. She is the antithesis of balance, a perversion of reality, and a sin of the galaxy. Unlike the Sith who twist and corrupt for their gain, Abeloth exists outside of the natural order entirely, a force that defies the will of the Force. She is no rival to the Jedi or Sith. She is something worse, an instrument of pure, unrelenting chaos and evil. Abeloth's creation, born from her attempt to share in the immortality of the Ones, shattered whatever humanity she once had, leaving only a fractured entity, something that cannot be reasoned with nor redeemed. The tragedy of Abeloth is whatever she was, whatever love or purpose she had, was torn apart by the warring forces within her. Her body, her soul, became a battleground of energy conflicting, ripping apart her identity, reshaping her into a being of malice and destruction, of pure madness. Abeloth is eternal, unbound by mortality that constrains other beings. This makes her more dangerous than any Sith. While the Sith seek to dominate the Force, Abeloth has transcended it, existing outside of its influence, becoming a nightmare that neither light nor dark can control. To the Jedi, she represents the ultimate failure of balance, a force that exists purely to corrupt. What haunted Grandmaster Luke Skywalker for so long about Abeloth was not her overwhelming strength, but what she represented. She was no enemy of the Jedi, no adversary to be defeated in battle. She was the living embodiment of the galaxy's greatest fears, an uncontainable, all-encompassing force of evil that defied all understanding. The Jedi fed off of understanding. Abeloth was beyond redemption or change, a fact that went against everything that the Jedi stood for as well. She was not driven by ambition, revenge, or greed. She simply was, and is, an eternal destructive force with no great purpose. Luke's understanding of the Force, shaped by the teachings of Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Qui-Gon Jinn, was shaken by the existence of Abeloth. He realized that Abeloth transcended all mortal concepts of morality. She was a harbinger of a galaxy ruled by despair. In Abeloth, Luke saw the worst-case scenario, a being that surpassed even the Force's control. Her twisted immortality made her unstoppable in the way that no Sith could ever achieve. Individuals like Palpatine sought immortality to rule, but Abeloth's existence was far more terrifying. She had no goal, no limits, and no ties to a natural cycle. She was a being corrupted, and she corrupted everything that she touched, be it reality, fabric of time, anything. The Jedi's purpose of preserving balance seemed almost futile in her face. Yet, Grandmaster Luke refused to succumb. Luke feared that Abeloth's immortality meant that she could outlast even the most heroic efforts to stop her. Luke feared that in a long-distance future, where the Jedi and Sith were only memories, that Abeloth would become the dominant force in the galaxy, a remaker of reality in her terrifying image. But Luke held fast to another belief, that there was nothing above the Force, that its will is stronger than any singular being, even one as powerful as Abeloth. He believed the Jedi as a force for good must remain the galaxy's guiding light within the chaos. The hope remains that Luke's driving force, a beacon of resistance against the unrelenting darkness, will always conquer. Still, Luke knew that defeating Abeloth was beyond the strength of any Jedi alone. Her power was so great, and her corruption so vast that no single faction, Jedi or Sith, could ever end her. The Mortis dagger, the weapon capable of killing a celestial being, became the focus of Luke's quest, and the quest of his Jedi Order. The dagger was a symbol of unity, a necessity for the galaxy to come together as one to face a threat beyond their simple conflicts. The dagger represented not just a means of destruction, but a path to healing the galaxy's divisions, uniting its people against a foe that cared nothing for their wars or their ideologies. Abeloth's presence made the division between the Jedi and Sith seem petty in comparison. The galaxy's survival depended on setting aside ancient rivalries to confront a being that could undo all of existence. Yet, this is no easy task. The Sith, ever driven by ambition, would not so easily cooperate, and even among the Jedi, there were those that doubted the possibilities of victory, believing Abeloth to be a pure inevitability. But Luke's leadership and unwavering faith in the Force kept the Jedi moving forward. Grandmaster Luke understood that Abeloth was not a threat to the Jedi or the Sith, but was a threat to existence and any future whatsoever. For Luke, defeating Abeloth was more than a battle against evil. It was a reaffirmation of the Force's ultimate purpose. He believed that as long as the Jedi stood as guardians of light, that there would always be hope, no matter how dire. The Mortis dagger was more than a weapon. It was potential. A potential to unite and overcome even the darkest of forces. Luke's faith in the Force's power to restore balance gave him the strength to stand against Abeloth, a being that embodied everything that the Jedi Order feared and rejected. The story of Abeloth is a reminder of the dangers of imbalance, unchecked ambition, and the perils of defying the natural order of things. She is an abomination, a warning of what can happen when the boundaries of creation are shattered. But through Luke's determination and the Jedi's commitment to balance, she also becomes a testament of resilience and hope. As long as the galaxy stands united against her chaos, Abeloth will remain a shadow on the horizon, a terrifying possibility, but one that can be faced with courage and faith. Abeloth is a being who transcends the power of any mortal force wielder, existing as a nightmare far beyond Sidious, or even Grandmaster Luke. Sidious, with his cunning and his mastery of the dark side, saw ultimate power, but remained confined within the limits of the Force. Abeloth, by contrast, has broken free of those boundaries, existing as pure chaos and corruption beyond control, or even comprehension. Her raw power is unmatched, her immortality unassailable, and her influence so vast that even the combined might of the Jedi and Sith seem insignificant in the face of her potential. She is not a rival to the Jedi or Sith. Abeloth is cataclysm, a force that cannot be reasoned with, redeemed, or subdued. In many ways, Abeloth is the logical next step in the evolution of the Jedi story. She represents a challenge far greater than any Sith Lord, embodying the ultimate test of the Jedi's resilience, faith, and unity. Her existence forces the galaxy to grapple with what lies beyond the traditional understanding of the Force, and to confront the consequences of imbalance on a cosmic scale. For the Jedi, Abeloth is both their greatest foe and a chance to prove that the light can prevail against even the most unimaginable darkness. Abeloth's story is not just about power, it is about what happens when the rules of the Force are broken and reality itself unravels. Facing her is the ultimate trial for the galaxy, demanding not just strength, but hope, unity, and an unshakable belief in the Jedi and the light. Luke Skywalker's greatest fear was not simply the looming shadow of Abeloth's immense power, but the unsettling thought that she may just be as eternal as the Force itself is. As a Jedi, he accepted that his life would one day end, But the possibility that Abeloth would endure beyond him was a fear that lingered at the edge of his mind. The Force's immortality was a comfort, a guiding light that transcended generations. But Abeloth, Luke saw as a dark reflection, a vile counterpart, immune to time, as unending as the very energy field that she had transcended. The tickle of doubt haunted him, whispering that even if she were defeated, she would never truly be destroyed, and that corruption may one day rise again to threaten the galaxy. Yet despite this fear, Luke held fast to his belief that the light embodied in the Jedi Order would continue to shine, so long as those who followed him carried the torch of hope and balance. But anyway, my friends and fellow students of the Force, this was Luke Skywalker's greatest fear about Abeloth, her immortality, and the lingering fear in the back of his mind that she was eternal. But anyway, friends, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on all of this Abeloth lore? And do you hope that we'll see her in live action one day? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel and the archives, and may the Force be with you.